Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap from behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized.
But we are now identifying as primarily being on Rumble.
We are identifying as not giving an F about what YouTube thinks about the topic. So
I do think we are primarily on Rumble. I think we do yes, we have more active viewers on Rumble right now than YouTube, and I believe I think we're migrating towards having more overall weekly views on Rumble.
I think so as well. And we really don't care much about YouTube. We're not trying to censor ourselves. We are still there because we want to pull more people away from YouTube.
Well, that's what Big Con paid us to say, was that we are being censored.
We are Big Con, I thought.
Yes, we are. Dire and I get paid millions and millions of dollars by Big Con, Ted Cruz in particular, to lie to you.
Yeah, Ted Cruz, that podcast guy, right?
Yeah, the podcaster. Ted Cruz this week, he released a podcast about how Mayorkas should be impeached. Well, I can't impeach Mayorkas.
You know who can?
A senator could.
Oh, a senator, right?
Yeah, like, if only Ted Cruz was a senator instead of a commentator like us.
Ted Cruz had the ear of some senators, you know.
How long have I been saying that it's a little bit of a conflict of interest for Ted Cruz, a sitting U.S. senator, to also have a full-time podcast in association with the Daily Wire?
I know, you say it quite often.
I've said it a few times. So this week, finally, Stephen Crowder actually joined me in not naming names, but he said that there is a problem that so many politicians have podcasts because it creates kind of a conflict of interest. And he felt like he was almost going to say a name, and there's a very obvious name, and it's Ted Cruz. But he didn't go that far, and I was a little disappointed after all of that ranting and raving Crowder did at the beginning of the year about big tech and big con, and it's all about the money. And
he's so eager to call out Daily Wire, so willing to call out Daily Wire, but not Ted Cruz.
I guess not. I don't know. It's a little strange. I feel like after he made such a big deal about becoming untethered and uncensored, it's a little strange that Crowder's got these things that he doesn't want to name by name. It's a little weird. You know, it's probably because he's got security clearance, right? I mean, he has security clearance, so he knows classified things that he's not allowed to say, right? Just like you.
No.
oh no, he doesn't. Oh, okay. So he's LARPing that he's got things that he can't actually say. Okay. Well, before we get into our stories, I want to make sure we thank everyone who makes this show possible, everyone who donates to us financially. We very much appreciate it. And also, you can share, subscribe, send us bits or whatever the things are called. Thank you very much for supporting us. Yeah, send us a Bitcoin.
Yeah, send us a Bitcoin, a full Bitcoin. Not Dogecoin.
We really probably should set up wallets for the show.
It would be smart. So we have a lot of not good news today. And we're starting off with one of the harder topics that no one likes to talk about. Is we had a shooting in Nashville, which is in Tennessee. This week we had a deranged female, corrupted by the trans death cult and motivated by radical left-wing hatred, who stormed into a Christian school in Nashville, Tennessee, and murdered 6 people, 3 children and 3 staff. 2 of the children were age 9, 1 was age 8. Having a kid lost at any age is a tragedy, but they had so much life ahead of them, and you can imagine how the families would feel having all their hopes, dreams, and love wrapped up in that child, and that child just being gone due to not an innocent mistake or an accident that could be avoided, not an act of God, but someone who just wanted to go and remove them from the earth. It's an evil act. It's unforgivable, and we show no respect for the monster that did it. And we're not going to name that person. because they're not a person. Once you go out and just kill innocent kids, I stop seeing you.
Yeah, but are we sure though? Because isn't it fun to use their dead name because they're dead now?
If you want to, I don't feel the need to.
Okay. Yeah. We won't use what she considered to be her real name, but her dead name that we can use now because she's dead was Adrian, right?
So that person very much wanted their death to create news stories, said so, and by leaving a manifesto, likely very much wanted to be remembered for this act. And I think the best thing we can do is make sure that they are forgotten and not remembered. That's exactly what they wanted. And they figured, you know what, to make sure my name is remembered in history, I'll just kill a bunch of kids. So it doesn't matter what their ideology was of the killer. No matter who does it, if you kill kids, innocent kids, you're a monster regardless. However, I started by framing this story, including the indisputable fact that the killer was a left-wing radical person, a privileged white rich kid who had
very rich too. Yeah,
had their brain poisoned by the left-wing trans ideology, and that is a contributing factor. It's a part of the story. We have the benefit of reporting on the story quite a while after it's happened, right? It happened, I believe, Monday. So yes. Because our show is on a Sunday, almost a full week has passed since it happened, and there's been a lot of information that's come out. We aren't saying this on the day it happened and pretending like what little information was available was all the information. We have the body cam footage of the cops. We have the statements from the parents. We have the statements from the police and what they found in the investigations. We actually know this to be true, unlike a lot of the media sources, mostly left wing, that said some very dumb things right off the bat that turned out to be the opposite of the truth. So shockingly, the body cam, which I wrote, never mind, the body cam footage of the officers running in to take out the threat was released very quickly. So let's play it.
It was probably released very quickly because it looks like they did a very good job once they got on scene, as opposed to, I don't know, there was another shooting in recent memory where the body cam footage was much longer, and it took a lot longer for it to come out.
Actually, the body cam footage wasn't dropped before someone else leaked the school's security camera footage.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was actually a lot harder to go through that story because there was so much additional footage, whereas in this one there was not a lot of footage because they got there, they did their job, and
you're going to be seeing the camera footage of one of two of the officers who are being heralded as being heroes because they were the ones who were ahead, who ran in straight at the gunfire to engage the target. I'm cutting out, by starting at minute 5, a lot of them clearing rooms because I wanted to start up to when they actually started hearing the gunshots themselves and they were able to zero in on where the target was and to start running straight for the target rather than slowly clearing rooms. But I want to point out that they showed extremely good tactical preparedness and prowess. They had skill moving as a team and clearing rooms very quickly. They were rushing through the school, trying to get through as many rooms as possible to find the target, while also not creating the risk of being, being flanked.
And there's a few other channels who are more specialized in breakdowns of these kinds of videos. I'd encourage going to watch Donut Operator and Warrior Poet Society. Both did very good breakdowns on the specific tactics.
So I'm not going to break it down, but I do want to give them a kudos. They were a very well-trained, professional police force that did what they're supposed to do and ran towards the danger. Let's watch this video.
It's upstairs. It sounds like it's upstairs. Go.
All right. So
It was one of the things that you noticed too, watching through the parts of the video that we saw and parts of the video that we skipped over that I'm sure a lot of people have seen earlier, is you hear constantly all these guys are encouraging each other, like go, 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 move, 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 you move, go, go, go. A lot of active encouragement of let's get this going as quick as we can. Don't stop. No time for fear. We're all here next to you. Everybody's moving. Let's go. And what did we see during Uvalde? We had actually some police officers fighting other police officers. The police officers that wanted to go help save children were being fought off by the cowards, forcing them to not do that.
yeah.
Very, very, very different.
When you see that, they are just as much encouraging their fellow officers to move forward as they are encouraging themselves too. That is, it is something that magnifies within a group. If everyone giving out that push, it encourages the entire group, and it magnifies as each person does it. It helps you get over your fear. It's a good tactic.
Yeah.
Anyways, this is a very stark difference from Uvalde, who went well over. It was an hour and a half from getting on scene.
It was a really long time. I think that they were on site for an hour and 20 minutes before they finally. And I think Uvalde, didn't it end with the shooter committing suicide?
So no, it ended well. May have committed suicide, but they did. It happened while a group of not Uvalde police came in. It was another team of officers that were usually on border security, I think.
Yeah, it was the BORTAC team.
BORTAC, yeah. So they went in there with, and I don't remember if he committed suicide or not, but they eventually did go in. But it was way too late. And these guys took 14 minutes from arrival. From actually getting into the school, I think it was 8 minutes or so.
No. You're way off. It was less than 3 minutes from the time they opened up their squad car door to the time they put the shooter down.
Oh.
So it took them like, I think took them 14 minutes to, I think it took them 11 minutes to get on site from the initial phone call. So it was the response time of getting on site.
Oh yes, yeah. That's what the article I read says. It took them 14 minutes to respond and get and kill the shooter.
Yeah,
it means from being notified.
Yeah, but once they were on site, which that goes to it's something that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. Is, well, what if somebody was already on site? Well, you can cut 11 minutes out of that, and probably you can cut 5 deaths out of that.
Well, we had I'm not sure if they called her a principal, but the administrator of the school, headmaster of the school, actually was one of the ones that was killed and had rushed the shooter and died because she was going unarmed, an old woman unarmed against an armed assailant. What if she'd had a gun?
Yep.
Because they knew that there was a shooter because the doors were locked and the shooter shot through the glass doors. So they had enough warning to put up the alarm and lock down most of the kids. And they had time to prepare themselves. If they had been allowed to be armed, they could have killed the shooter.
And we absolutely, from what has been released so far, it's not nearly enough. From everyone's understanding, there is a lot more information left to be divulged. And the public deserves to have that information, because the public deserves to know what this shooter's plan was, what was going through her mind when she did this, what her plan was, what her methodology was for coming up with a plan, so that other schools can come up with defense plans against that. Because what we do know is that she had attempted to do this at another school a few minutes prior to choosing this school, but she pivoted because the other school had some kind of other security measure in place. It's not necessarily clear what that was or what the other school was, but the public absolutely deserves to know what it was that dissuaded her from attacking the other school. And if it had anything to do with actively armed security. That needs to be, it is an absolute disservice to children all over the country if that information is not taken to heart and used to form some kind of defense plan at your school.
The police investigating the shooting said that she had detailed maps and plans for the school that she ended up shooting up, and including the different entrances, and that she likely had chose the entrance that she chose because she knew that she could breach it by shooting through the glass. That was intended. So, I mean, I don't know why you would have a school that you're trying to protect against, you're trying to harden against shootings, and you can lock the door, but if you make it out of glass, what's the point?
Yeah, so there's always the argument from the left, which I think doesn't really hold any water. It's just based in indignation, which is, and that's how a lot of people are making arguments these days, just being indignant about something, and you're supposed to, oh wow, yeah, this person doesn't like that. I don't know why, but they're really emotional about it, so I should agree with them. And the left will say, well, we don't want our schools looking like prisons, do we?
I don't know anyone who complains about fire doors.
Well, and I don't know anybody who complains about banks being secured either. And somebody pointed out even this week that the banks don't even really have stuff in them anymore. This week, probably in particular. Yet we secure banks like we do prisons, and nobody complains about that or is indignant about, I don't want my bank looking like a prison. Nobody says that.
What's more important, your money or your kids?
Well, one of them is actually in the building that it proposed to be in, and the other one's not. So I would say probably your kids.
What's more important, the numbers and zeros that represent your money or your kids?
Yes.
So let's take a look at Biden's shocking initial response.
Yes. So we have, let's see, let's jump to this. So I believe this is, we're watching ABC here. So obviously this was breaking on Monday. And as is, as usual, usually we'll have some kind of breaking address that
There's
morning.
something that we did not find. So I don't think this is the right one, but the Fox News version of this clip.
Well, let's watch this first, and we'll talk about that one in a second here.
Way to create systems within local government that are better.
Brad, we're going to take it to the podium
people.
now. Brad, the President of the United States speaking now.
My name is Joe Biden. I'm Dr. Joe Biden's husband.
ABC just cut away from live news to hear an
And I
address
ate
from
Jenny's
Biden
ice cream, chocolate chip.
about
I came down because I heard there was chocolate chip ice cream. By the way, I have a whole refrigerator full upstairs. You think I'm kidding? I'm not. God. Ben, how are you, pal? One of the best guys in the United States Congress, Ben Cardin. Folks, welcome to the White House. It's a delight to have you all here. And who are those good-looking kids back there? They're your kids, all four of them? Well, stand up, guys.
Get it?
Okay, even outside the context, like this, like weird clapping, like seals for like, oh, like Biden just asked kids to stand up. Like I don't necessarily understand why this is like a clappable moment, but okay.
Well, I want you to know, like you, I had two brothers, three in our family, three brothers and one sister. And my sister is smarter than all of us. Not a joke. She used to be 3 years younger than me. Now she's 23 years younger than me. Yeah. She managed every one of my campaigns for office, even back when I was in high school. We went to the same university 2 years apart. She graduated honors.
We
I
are
graduated.
90 seconds into ABC cutting away to the president to talk about
And we had a
shooting.
simple rule in the family. Listen to Val. My sister Valerie is incredible. So guys, be nice to your sister. You're going to need her. You're going to need her. I promise. It's the same lineup. You're the oldest. Who's number two? Number 2?
To give you a sense
Who's
of
number 3?
how long he is
twins?
taking
Are
to
you
get
guys
to the
twins?
point.
Yeah, this is
The,
painful.
Okay.
the
All
police,
right. Just
Officer Rex and the other guy here, they almost made it to the shooter by this point. Like from getting out of their squad cars. Like that's how long this has been.
that's how it was in our outfit. Well, I'm so glad to see you all. Thanks for coming with Mom, okay? You got to take care of your mom. Dads are much harder to raise, but, you know. Before I begin to speak, the reason I spent a little time in the kids, I just want to speak very briefly about the school shooting. And
All right, so we are 143 seconds into his address.
We'll spare you what he actually says about it because he basically says shootings are bad, guns are bad. We need to ban guns.
Yes.
That's all right.
Now Joe Biden, he was very clearly aware that he was being brought down to the White House room. Obviously, they have some kind of event going on at the White House.
It's some event they had previously scheduled for
which is
women's
fine.
owned small businesses.
Which is fine. However, he was brought down to the room because they already had it set up for camera equipment, probably, and it was an appropriate place to do that. And so he was brought down. He would have been told, and we know that he was told about the shooting because he is. We just paused it right as he's about to go in to address the shooting. And it took him 143 seconds to get to that. And what was he doing in the 143 seconds leading up to that? He's telling jokes about ice cream. He was talking about how attractive he thought those children were.
In context with him, is extremely creepy.
Yes, there is no context in which Joe Biden notices children, and it's okay. That there is no context for that. That's not a joke. Making jokes about I'm Jill's husband, wife, something. It's very strange, very inappropriate. We saw other videos later in the week after this initial address. I mean, this situation's like almost still ongoing at the time that he's making this address. So that's fine that he doesn't have a lot of information. However, he did have some information and he did not need to do 143 seconds of stand-up comedy before he addressed it. And we saw other videos later in the week where he's making jokes about that whether or not it was Christians that were targeted. He laughs about it. He says, well, if my opponents think that it was because Christians were targeted, then I probably don't think it was.
Yeah, some Republican senator
has
suggested that possibly they were targeted because they're Christians, and Biden was asked about it by a reporter. He says, "Oh, well, if he said that, then I probably disagree," and then laughed.
Yeah. So it was very, very strange, very, not that strange, right? I mean, it's, the Democrats don't really see people that are not on their side. It's all about the narrative. It's all about the narrative, and they don't really care what happens to people outside the narrative, right?
But the left wing was trying to fact check and say, no, he didn't tell jokes instead of talking about the shooting in Nashville. The fact checks actually say that the video is taken out of context and that he was actually planning on it was in his speech that these jokes were already pre-scripted jokes that he was supposed to give at the speech at these women's small business meeting.
Yeah.
But they leave out, yes, he was planning on giving his speech, but he didn't have to continue because he knew he was adding in the information about the shooting, and he decided to be leading up to talking about the shooting, telling a bunch of jokes.
Yeah, and so this was an obvious deviation from the schedule. Again, we knew that this room was probably selected for an address to the nation just because it was already wired up with camera equipment and stuff like that. And again, that's fine, but when there's breaking news that requires a presidential address, you address the breaking news. We didn't have, I guess think through other historic events where we've had presidential addresses in real time. 9/11 comes to mind. We didn't have George Bush up there giving stand-up routines just because that's what was loaded up in the prompter. I don't know.
So there was a bunch of news shows that had cut to this address saying that that Biden was going to address the shooting, and they were shocked by how inappropriate it was. Even left-wing sources had a few that had the same response. Fox News had a great one because they cut off his comments early in the middle of the jokes. Because like, wow, that's inappropriate. We'll come back and say something.
Yeah, we were looking for that, and that. I don't know, that got memory hold really quick, but yeah, Fox News, they did the same thing ABC did. Is okay, we're going to cut to the president remarking this, and I actually had not seen this much of his stand-up routine because you're right, Dyer. I did get it cut off when I was watching the Fox News version of it because they cut it off after like 30 seconds and said, well, yeah, I guess we'll go back if he starts talking about it, but given the circumstances, this doesn't really seem appropriate, and so they went back to their commentators and analysis team. Until Joe got back around. But yeah, I guess this is actually worse than I thought it was.
Yeah, so I made sure we played because a lot of videos I pulled were the short version before people cut away. I wanted to make sure we played the long one because it showed that he actually did do those jokes directly before talking about Nashville, and not that he did it instead of talking about Nashville, which is what they're trying to say happened.
So does the fact check that, well, these were pre-scripted, does that go against what Joe Biden was just saying at the end here? Well, the reason why I was doing these jokes about children is because of what just happened. I mean, so I don't know. The fact check doesn't seem to line up with.
The fact check was trying to say that he didn't go talk about the shootings at all, and that the conservatives, these mean, evil conservatives, are playing a clip of him talking about something completely different in a different event that was not meant to address the shooting. And that's a lie, because immediately after, you saw it, there's not a cut here. After he did all the jokes and did that stand-up routine, he talked about the shootings, which was his plan.
And throughout the week, as Joe Biden continued to talk about the shooting, he seemed to have had about the same level of information that he had on this particular day, right after. He would later in the week go on to mention that the shooter used not one, but two AK-47s.
He said it in this clip, too, if we let it play. But it's not worth it. Yeah. It's not. We don't need to play it. He says it's two AK-47s.
Yeah, he says two AK-47s, also known as AK-94. I can do math in real time on camera. That's not gonna come back to bite me.
It was part of him saying that we need to ban the assault rifles because he was claiming the shooter had used AKs.
No, the shooter, did the shooter use two AK-47s, Dyer?
No, she did not. She used one.
Did she even use rifles?
She used an AR pistol and then also a carbine, which is not a rifle necessarily. It uses handgun rounds. It's basically a pistol with a longer barrel and a folding stock, I think.
An AR pistol, to be quite frank, is a misnomer. It's not really an AR pistol, is it? I mean, the Armalite didn't design that as a pistol, right? What makes it an? Do you understand what makes it an AR pistol?
Short barrel and no stock.
Well, that's still just a carbine. What makes it an AR pistol is just that it has a M-LOK or Picatinny system on it, and it kind of resembles a small AK or a small AR. That's all that it means. It has almost the same meaning as assault rifle, which is to say that it has a certain aesthetic to it. So AR pistols are really more describing the aesthetic. All of the guns used would have either been pistols or carbines, or a pistol carbine, if you will.
And a carbine basically is a pistol.
Yes.
It's got a longer barrel and a stock on it, but still the mechanics of it.
Yes.
Still a pistol.
Technically not rifles, and technically not assault rifles.
But also not covered under the assault rifle ban.
And untechnically, definitely not AK-47s.
Yes, definitely not.
Now, also, I would support a ban on AK-47s because you know who uses AK-47s, Dyer? Communists use AK-47s. Red-blooded Americans use the AR-15.
I don't support the banning of AKs because when we're invading Russia, I want to be able to use their own ammo against them.
That's fair.
Anyways, so what else did Biden do this week?
So you may have, if depending on what kind of company you worked for, if you work for a large company, especially very large companies, as I do, you may have noticed that everybody was celebrating a new holiday on Friday. It probably should have been on Saturday, just because April Fool's Day. But Biden also and the Democrats, they all got together to declare a new liberal liturgical feast day, sometimes called a national holiday, for trans people. So the liberal liturgical calendar now has the Feast of Trans Visibility.
And it's just a coincidence they also lined up with the Trans Day of Vengeance, right?
Yes, which is actually interesting. From the research I had, the group that initiated the Trans Day of Visibility, they are actually the ones that pivoted to Trans Day of Vengeance. That was my understanding of what was going on. Now, my company and a lot of other companies had on their homepage on Friday, their support of Trans Visibility Day, which was a little scary. Maybe think about maybe I need to be carrying more.
Yeah, my response to that was, I think that trans people are some of the most visible people in society, and they don't need more trouble being seen. Generally, that's the first thing people see about them.
Yeah, have you ever seen a trans person and been like, man, I can't see you?
Yeah, usually... And usually, if for some reason you're not able to tell that guy with the giant Adam's apple and the chin that doesn't quite look feminine and the body doesn't look feminine and out of proportions, and if you don't immediately realize, oh, that is a dude in a dress, and it actually is someone's is convincing. If they're on the left, they're probably going to tell you that they're trans.
Yeah, it's like the new veganism. They'll tell you.
It's the first thing they'll tell you about themselves. That's why the pronouns are so important. They gotta lecture you when they first start talking to you before you have a chance to say anything. The first thing they need to say to you is lecturing about how you are to address them.
Yeah. Now you weren't allowed to say anything against the Trans Day of Visibility or Vengeance to start with, but due to the fact that a transgender murdered a bunch of 9-year-olds on Monday, obviously that means that trans people were the victim here. So you were even more unable to say anything about it. And the left tried to quickly capitalize on that and other things. And they were a little schizophrenic, maybe like the shooter, about which thing they wanted to go after first. First, we were talking about, first the left-wing media tried to capitalize on the tragedy for more gun restrictions. This is obviously a problem with the guns. Obviously the AK-47s did it. Maybe the AK-15s even. And then they said, well, actually, it's because you actually had live, like as this event was breaking, you had several outlets citing that, well, it's important context that Tennessee, the state where this happened at, and many other states are they're passing bans on transgender surgeries.
As if that
justifies, yeah, because what would be the reason for bringing that up as the context? Either the context is that that's the reason for it, or the context is, well, that justifies it. Either way, you've now got the media and the left relating political talking points, or right-wing political initiatives, linking that directly with a mass killing of small school children. And what is there's a name for violence that's carried out.
Terrorism.
Yeah, for violence that's carried out for political changes in order to create some kind of political change. Violence that's carried out specifically for a political end, and it's called what, Dyer? Terrorism. So it was again a little schizophrenic of the left there. So, is this a reason to restrict guns? Is this a reason to justify terrorism? Is this really?
Because, the Tennessee deserves it for for banning drag shows for kids and cutting off 6-year-olds' dicks. Do they deserve it, or was this a bad thing because she used guns?
Yeah. Yeah. And so you had this morph throughout the week into. I believe it was on Thursday, you had one of many takeovers of the Tennessee state capitol, by, I guess, trans people and trans activists. And they were shouting the slogan, 7 fingers, 7 victims. And what that was meant to represent was that they thought that there was 7 victims of the shooting on Monday, when there was in fact only 6. There was 3 school children and 3 faculty members, and that was the extent of the victims. The shooter also did die that day, but they are obviously not counted among the victims.
Not a victim,
obviously,
perpetrator, and also not human.
And so you have the actual morphing of the quote-unquote perpetrator here being turned into a victim, that it wasn't the person's fault for shooting up and killing all these school children. She only, it was Michael Knowles who forced her hand. It was the Tennessee state government passing a bill. It was probably Marjorie Taylor Greene and maybe Trump to boot. They really forced her hand to murder all of those 9-year-olds. And obviously, for most normal people, that's delusion, absolute break from reality. But delusion and breaks from reality have now become like, that's just mainstream leftist dogma now. Okay. We'll talk more about that later, apparently. All right. So, let's see here. So you also had, back to being kind of schizophrenic, is back to gun control. You had the teachers union president, Randy Weingarten. She was calling for, which I mean, that almost sounds like it's her trans name. Like
Yeah,
Randy.
it does.
Yeah. She's calling for gun confiscation.
Saying we should be brave to be like Canada and Australia.
Yeah, she was talking about these great like democracies and great civilizations, and then she like referenced Canada. I was like, wait a second.
Yeah, the bastion of freedom.
Yeah,
of
I feel like you did the switcheroo on me, and now I'm confused. And so basically, again, the president of the Teachers Union for America, she would like to see more of her union members, I guess, running at gunmen and dying because they don't have any way of defending themselves. Then you also had Joe Biden again. He suggested that assault rifles should be banned. And if a ban was not possible, then there should be an age limit for rifles that should be moved to 21 instead of 18.
You know that's funny? Because guess what the age of the shooter was?
I believe she was 28 and still living at home.
Yes, she was a 28-year-old basement dweller in a mansion.
Yes.
So she would not have been affected by this at all. So banning assault rifles and changing the age of buying rifles.
Also, none of her guns were assault rifles or rifles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. None of those things would have affected this shooting. So what is the goal then? If the change you're making would not have prevented the thing that you're saying is the reason for changing it, then what really was your goal? It was just simply to further curtail the Second Amendment. It wasn't actually to prevent this.
Well, and this just proves that it doesn't matter what the weapon is, right? Because we know that by the FBI statistics, pistols are used most especially by gangsters to commit homicide much more frequently than rifles are. I think it's something like even as much as like 2 or 3% is like the extent of rifle murders, like homicides committed with a rifle, versus the other like 95% being committed with a pistol.
With the killing with hammers.
Yeah. The number of pistols used in homicide is like way off, like many multiples of what rifles are used for. So yeah, it's also, so it doesn't matter. Where I was going with that is it doesn't matter what the weapon was that was used in these tragedies. It's clear that it doesn't matter to Joe because he has no idea what he's talking about. Everybody else in the media, no idea what weapons even being used, and they're proposing banning weapons that were not even at the crime scene. And it just goes to show it doesn't matter what the weapon is. Like, it's not any particular weapon. It's just all of them. And that's where they're going to try to go with this eventually, is that it's just all the weapons. It's got nothing to do with any particular weapon.
Yeah, and they're just trying to capitalize and use the tragedy for political reasons. It's nakedly obvious, and they're just trying to incrementally take away our ability to defend ourselves because that's their true goal.
Yes. Let's see here. So, you got through all that?
Yeah, we also have a slide for this next one.
Oh, we do. Well, let me get to that. Is this the this was the Caltech carbine that apparently
it's
sucks.
a handgun with a barrel extender on it and a friggin'
Why does it look like there's
attached.
too many straps on it?
well, I mean, she wasn't exactly the smartest person.
Are more straps more better?
I think it makes the guns fire faster.
It does. Wow.
So let's go to the next one. This refers to the Jocelyn Berry tweet.
Oh yeah. So you also had a third side of the coin here with the left, where they weren't super worried about whether or not this was like trans
Evil.
people's fault or like conservatives' fault, or if this was like a gun issue or what it
They
was.
supported it basically.
Yes, it was just outright support. So this is Jocelyn Berry. Jocelyn Berry is the press secretary for, were the press secretary for Arizona governor, which is who is that? Is that Carrie Lake?
That's
No, Carrie Lake's the one that
Hobbs.
didn't win, right?
This is Hobbs's.
Hobbs,
press
yes,
secretary.
Hobbs who beat Carrie Lake. So I guess good job on you, Arizona. So Katie Hobbs, current Arizona governor, Democrat, her press secretary tweeted this out at like 9 p.m. Eastern on Monday. That now the attack happened at like I think like 10:30 a.m. Eastern. So we're talking about like 11 hours after everybody in the country.
And how could this not be a reference to
Yes,
this?
most especially the press secretaries for politicians.
And her job is to not say things like this.
Yes. And so she tweets this out, which is a gif from an old movie, I guess, where this is a battered wife and her daughter, and she's, I believe, defending her and her daughter from a bad guy. And good for her. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do, right? We want to see more battered
she
women.
Don't do this if she didn't have guns. That's the irony of this, right?
Yes.
That this woman standing up for her life and the life of her child would not be possible if Jocelyn Berry got what she wanted.
Yeah. But in the context here, you can see Jocelyn Berry, us when we see transphobes, which I believe that the transphobes she's referring to is just anybody who noticed.
9-year-olds.
Yeah, a coincidence noticer that a bunch of 9-year-olds got killed by a trans person, and that the trans person, based off what the police had said later that afternoon, the police were asked directly, did the gender identity have something to do with the motivation? And their answer, I don't want to give an exact quote because I can't remember the exact quote, but the answer implied, yes, obviously it has something to do with the attack. And so if you noticed that, if you were to fact check true that the transgender identity had something to do with her motivation to kill a bunch of 9-year-olds, well, you're a transphobe, and the response to that is just to also kill you too. It's just like this infinite cycle of, well, everybody basically who doesn't agree with them has to die.
Yes.
And I would say that in general, rhetoric on both sides runs pretty hot, but I'm not going to do this both sidesism, because usually when the left thinks that the right's running pretty hot for rhetoric, usually they're misinterpreting on purpose.
Or it's a completely reasonable response to something someone else has said.
Yes. But the left, they're much more like the leftist people are much more receptive to stuff like this. Clearly that transgender girl was, that she was receptive to the idea that killing people was the right way to get what she wanted, or to,
It's a recurring theme from the left. Anytime you question their decisions, their morals or policies, and say that no, it's bad, or question them in any way, they tend to think, oh, well, then you're a Nazi and we need to kill you. You are evil and we must kill you. It's not, we can try to find a middle ground. No, you have to be removed. And what other ideologies throughout history would try to kill anyone who didn't immediately conform to their policies.
Usually authoritarian ones.
Oh yeah, it's kind of like in the definition.
Oh yeah. Weird.
Yeah.
Alrighty. So, she again, I said she were the press secretary for governor for Arizona, because after about 24 hours, I believe it was like 23 hours and 50 minutes of this just being up on Twitter after a horrific national tragedy, and she didn't have to pay any consequences right off the bat for it. Twitter let it stay up for a while, but enough people were upset about it, and she eventually, I believe that she resigned or was resigned, and the tweet was taken down. She privated her Twitter account, and she is gone from being the press secretary now. I will not be surprised if you see a Jocelyn Berry pop up in about 18 months, sometime between 18 months and maybe the next election, and she'll probably go on some kind of tour, and she'll be on the panel or something like that. You might not even know that it's her. She might come back as, well, I was canceled by the right, or, maybe she'll just pop back up anonymously.
Everyone forgets that she supports the killing of people who don't like kids being killed.
Yeah, but you can, usually the leftists, they'll be, there's usually a rehab program for that, where there's a kind of like a jobs program for leftists that have gone a little too far. So she'll probably pop back up, not to worry. And yeah. I'm sure we will all remember that when she does. Let's see here. So another trans activist mocked Tennessee, tweeting, thank God Tennessee protected the children from so-called horrors of drag and gender-affirming care so that they can be shot by an AR-15. And this was part of a large number of tweets. Do we have that on the...
I'm not sure if that's one of the ones that made the slides.
Okay. Yeah, we had a large number of tweets this week, right after it happened, when we knew that there was a shooter, but we didn't know anything about the shooter. And so obviously Tennessee just passed a bill banning gender reassignment surgery, which I guess, to be blunt, is the cutting off of the penis of small children, or the removal of arm tissue to create a fake penis on a girl, on a little girl. So Tennessee just passed a bill saying that you can't do that. This isn't like Frankenstein's lab here. It's kind of can't do that to kids.
And, the viral irony.
Well, hold on. So they just did that. And so you had this shooting, and you had a lot of people in like the hour or so after the shooting, before we knew that it was transgender person. They were tweeting out, these jokes and memes and cartoons about like, the right, they're so focused on saving children from drag shows, but they don't care about saving children from gun violence. And, kids have never died at a drag show, but they, it's not the trannies killing them, but, it's the AR-15s, it's the guns. And then we find out, oops daisy, actually it is the trannies. It is the trannies that are killing the kids.
Yeah, the real irony is that when you induce or magnify gender dysphoria, because there is a level of gender curiosity and gender dysphoria that's completely normal at kids, at the 6-year-old age group, when they are figuring out what it is expected of them, what they are, what is normal behaviors, because they're seeing it being modeled by a bunch of different people in the society, and they're trying to figure out where they fit, right? And you can either reinforce what will be normal for them to grow into and be healthy as an adult, or you can reinforce what is unhealthy and abnormal and will make them not fit in, and will contradict with what they're feeling later on when they have hormones. And they're becoming more aware of their body. So if you reinforce that dysphoria, you can create a mental problem that it has a really high percentage of depression and suicide. That if they did not have that, they would not have depression and suicide. And that depression can often lead to the self-harm and the harm of others. So if you are intentionally inducing gender dysphoria, which, by the way, since the trans movement has expanded, the number of people, young kids who are identifying in schools as being trans or non-binary has skyrocketed. It is something that is not normal. It's not something that people are being born with. It's something that's being taught to kids. They're being taught to question their role in society and what their gender expression should be. They're causing this problem, and drag shows are part of the grooming process to make people confused about what gender they are. So
well,
yes,
drag shows where they're inviting the kids.
no, sorry, child drag shows,
Yes.
like the drag story hour I'm referring to, right?
It is
not
weird though. I don't disagree with, like, I'm not trying to like say like, oh, you like, you know, you misspoke or anything like that, because it is strange that they've almost entirely removed the like common colloquial understanding of drag show now is just it includes children. Like that they have gone so far, not just like, oh, you know, we've got drag shows and then we have these like special ones where we're going to invite kids. It's like it's ubiquitous now.
It's really hard when you're ranting to put in all the additional context, right? Like obviously in this context, we're talking about a law that was banning certain drag shows for young kids, and obviously the effect I'm referring to is kids being affected by drag shows, not like some guys going to a drag show as an adult. That's not going to cause this problem. But the point is, they're saying that, oh, well, guns kill people, trans ideology doesn't. Actually, no. And AR actually ended the threat. And AR wasn't used by the threat. And the person who was a threat because they were messed up in the head because of Fox? What messed her up in the head?
I was not paying attention for the last sentence. Trans ideology. Sorry.
There you go. Okay.
Another thing that might have been messing with her head is, I don't know if you saw it. It almost is like a moot point at this point now because of what happened this week. But I don't know if you saw last week. There was the trailer for the latest season of Jazz or Chaz or whatever the hell her name is. That transgender boy who was transitioned to a girl at 13 or 14, and TLC has like a TV show. Did you see or hear about the trailer for the latest season of that?
Yeah, but she's she whatever. They are they're regretting their transition.
Yeah. So Jazz seems to be very
the normal evolution of the trans ideology.
Yeah, Jazz seems to be very unhappy with what has gone on with himself. He again he's gone through it's amazing that the left will say there is no transgender surgery for kids. All of America watched, whether you watched it or not. It was part of, you know, Jazz is part of like the cultural zeitgeist at this point. She's had a TLC show that's very, very popular for like 8 or 9 years now. He got his penis removed and turned into a vagina, which is not even a real vagina. It's just they cut a hole in his taint and removed his penis when he was 14. They did this on TV for everybody to see. This was an extremely popular show. Everybody saw it happen. Everybody knows it happened. And so this idea that the left has that like they can get away with saying like, oh, you know, this isn't happening. No, they did it. They actually did it on TV. And we saw this years ago because that happened when Jazz was 14, and I think he's like 21 or 22 now. He one of the scenes that really I think is relevant to what happened this week. One of the scenes, he's being interviewed and he says, you know, I don't know who I am anymore. My mind is always in a fog. My mind is always in a fog. And that one, I'm not a doctor or a psychologist or a psychiatrist or, you know, and I'm not, you know, a pharmacist either, but I would hazard to guess that being on hormone therapy, which Jazz is, having that many extra hormones being injected in your body every week, I would imagine that gives you brain fog. And what he's describing of just constantly being in a fog, I would almost definitely guess is probably from his hormone injections. And so I wonder, and we've not there's a lot of speculation, and there's not been any good, hard, sourceable evidence yet as to what the shooter on Monday, what her hormone regimen was or her medication regimen was. There was clearly something. She was, it is documented that she was seeing a doctor for clinical depression. It's not clear if she was being
and emotional disorders.
Yeah, it's not clear if she was being prescribed for that. It's not clear what hormones she was on. But it does go to show, I think it's a pretty valid theory that if Jazz is saying that she's constantly in a brain fog, it's probably caused by the hormones.
It's also very likely that a lot of shooters in the past have been on drugs for depression. And if she's seeing a doctor for emotional disorders, for many emotional disorders, the answer is antidepressant. So it's very possible that we do not know. Just to be clear, I'm making a leap of logic here that is not proven, that it's very possible, since she was under the care of a doctor for emotional disorders, that she may have been on an antidepressant as well.
Let's see here. The Fonz 46 says, I thought Jazz got transitioned at 5 or something. Her parents let her start cross-dressing and presenting at age 5. And then I believe it was age like 14.
Which is locking that kid into that problem.
Yeah, I believe it was at sometime around like 14 or 15 is when they gave him surgery. However, he was on hormone blockers up until that point. So even at 15, he hadn't gone through puberty yet. Which, I mean, I don't know. I hope he doesn't, but Jazz is in a pretty bad spot right now. I couldn't imagine. It sounds like he feels like he's trapped in a woman's body now. And then a lot of people are saying, well, he probably is actually experiencing real gender dysphoria now because he's now trapped in this, this hacked together Frankenstein version of a female body. And he can't get out of it.
It started off with him saying at some point, "Oh, I want to wear pink today." And the parents going off and like, well, that means he's a girl.
I know your daughter. She's kind of rough and tumble. She ever want to do a thing that's maybe like a boy thing, like I don't know, like run or throw a ball or something?
Absolutely. And my son has done things that are characteristically like when he was younger, where it would be a girly thing. Like he wanted to play with his sister's dolls. He wanted to wear pink on a certain day, and then. We didn't say, I think you can't wear pink. Like, sure, I don't care what shirt you wear as long as you're covering yourself. And I don't care if you want to play with that toy. I'd make a big deal of it, right? And you know what? Just things go on where I keep, treating him like a boy. And he decides, you know what? I like blue. You know what? I want to buy a truck. He's got all these cars. I never told him what toy to buy. I just go buy toys, and he picks out what he wants, right?
And there's this kind of this leftist idea that when kids do that, a father like Dyer, who's kind of a trad con kind of guy, that you're gonna beat him and say no, you're gonna like blue and you're gonna play football and all this stuff.
Don't tell him what to like.
You can just allow them to work through it on their own, and they will eventually figure it out. Somebody else pointed out this week, I was listening to some commentary that it must be it can't possibly be a social construct for masculinity and femininity and the gender roles. They can't possibly be a social construct because the human race was able to propagate itself prior to the development of language and society. So there must be something pretty deep in there where we can, if left to our own devices, usually figure it out with a high degree of certainty there. And so if you just let them work it out, you don't got to beat them or anything. But if you're like Dyer, you just let them work it out and eventually they'll figure it out and it's fine. It's not a big deal. A lot of kids will go through that and it's not even that abnormal. The fear, the absolute terror that you must feel, Dyer, is if a teacher happens to notice that. And we see that is a thing the left is desperately trying to do, is to separate the parents from the child, and so that when a teacher sees that, the teacher can take them into the special secret closet and say, well, you can be a girl here. We can give you a new name, and everybody's going to clap for you, and everybody's going to be really excited, and they encourage it, and we make sure you keep it a secret from your dad. That's the terrifying part now.
Yeah, I think that we are, with the first two kids, I have four, we are past the age where they don't really know what gender is, and they are just simply copying everything they see, no matter who it is, and just trying to, just do things, right? That for both my daughter and my son, they both just copied things they saw. Right, and that meant they sometimes were copying, playing with boy, stereotypical toys and girl stereotypical toys and clothes. It was all just, monkey see, monkey do. Right, now they're past that point. They've started cementing into their own personalities, and my daughter is, without any coaxing, super into fashion to a point that it's bothersome, and. Yeah, and my son's really into martial arts and trucks and cars and shit, and building things. He loves building things, right? And those are things I didn't encourage it. I just, whatever they did, I support them. Whatever they want to do, that is not harmful. If they want to draw,
and you said your son's getting good at art, right?
He's really good at art.
He's pretty good at drawing. Which
painting. Yeah.
Is, I guess some people might think, that's a little bit girly, but it's I don't know, I think art's pretty gender neutral. But yeah.
So the thing is, I was really, I really enjoy art, but I picked a lifestyle that never gave me really the time to do it. So it's kind of cool seeing him have the chance to do it. And when he asked for paints, I'll go buy you paints. Let's go to the store together. You tell me what you want.
So, bringing us all back in, kids, right. they do stuff sometimes, and usually it'll work itself out. But if you introduce into that process, instead of allowing them to work itself out and allowing the parents to make choices about how they work themselves out, if you are then jumping in and injecting them with a crazy cocktail of hormones, and with this girl, potentially injecting her or giving her pills with, radically altering brain chemistry, which, interestingly enough, we had last summer. It is a little while ago, but it was over last summer. There was that paper that came out that basically said the entire theory of psychopharmacology is bunk. This whole idea that depression's caused by chemical imbalances in the brain, they were pretty conclusive that is not the mechanism by which depression forms. And so you still, it's interesting, this is the doctors, the scientists, they have this paper that shows, psychopharmacology, as we know, it's kind of bunk. And we were prescribing all of these drugs because, that fit into the theory that depression was caused by chemical imbalances. And now we found out that wasn't true, but we're going to keep prescribing the drugs because we got a whole industry to support. Who's going to pay for the politicians if the trannies aren't taking depression drugs, Dyer? Have you thought of that?
I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah, I bet you didn't. You're selfish, that's why.
All right, did we read this yet?
Let's see here. So NBC wrote that fear pervades Tennessee's trans community amid a focus on the Nashville shooter's gender identity. Now, hold on a second, because it's always, we literally now have a national holiday called the Trans Day of Visibility. It's extremely important to point out trannies wherever, whenever, however they're doing all the time. And then we point out, hey, they can be mass shooters too. They can kill a bunch of little children too. And it's like, whoa, hold on. We don't want to have her gender identity come into focus here. That'd be inconvenient.
Yeah.
Let's see here. We had a transgender activist from the community saying, we're already fearing for our lives, and now it's even worse. I'm sure everybody listening has heard this from another commentator this week, but I'll bring it up again because it's funny and it's true. You had Norm Macdonald, the famous comedian. He had a bit where he was talking about, he's like, I was talking to one of my friends, and they said they were really worried about, what if a Muslim extremist, what if he gets his hands on a dirty bomb, and he sets it off in a place like New York, and it could kill tens and millions of people, and it'd just be terrible. I just keep thinking about the blowback on the Muslim community and how awful it would be. How awful it would be for Muslims everywhere if a terrorist was able to get their hands on a dirty bomb and kill tens of millions of people.
I would care more about the New Yorkers.
Yeah,
right?
and so you have the unironic reality of that joke now playing itself out in real time with the transgender community. It's like, transgender shooter, transgenders most affected. It's the blowback that's the real problem. You had immediately too from a lot of commentators, a lot of your kind of quote unquote mid moderates and stuff like that, saying, well, it's a concern that what if religious people start. They never have. we had the Crusades 1,000 years ago, and you've got Islam at all times, but that's it. That's the extent of religious people doing anything ever. They don't do stuff. Religious people do not get out and fight stuff. They don't. Not Western Christianity, at least.
And right now, bring it back to home. Conservative Christians don't have, in America right now, do not have an ideology that encourages violence against people that disagree with them. It actually has an ideology that encourages saving people in their mind by trying to convince them to do something that's better for themselves, right? It's not a violent thing. It's not a you follow us or you die. It's follow us, and if you don't, we feel bad for you.
Yeah, well, where the genocide comes from is it comes from the 100-year experiment that Europe had over the last 100 years, where they experimented with why do I lost my word? It means the opposite of religious. It starts with an S. Why can't Secular, thank you. We experimented in Europe for 100 years with radical secularism. And what did it bring us? It brought us World War I. It brought us World War II. And then it brought us we expanded that out into China, and we had the Great Leap Forward. And we have all of those atrocities. You have millions and millions and millions, 100 million people dead from communism, from radical secularism the last 100 years. And none of that came out of Western Christianity. And it's funny because those are the things that are referenced, well, really one in particular, those are the events that are referenced by trans people, by the left, to say, well, the way that we know the way that we know religious people are going to come genocide us is because that's what we did when we were in power with a secular power. We genocided a bunch of people on religious grounds, so we figured that they'll just, they'll probably do it back to us.
And the irony is that the people that are constantly saying, if you disagree with us, that you are evil and you should be killed, those are the ones who are saying that they feel that they are in danger because we disagree with them, and because they've committed active violence against us, and they're worried about us responding. That's the insanity of this. It boggles the mind that they're saying that they're the victims. But also, I know someone who's trans in my life, and they said to me, "You don't know what it's like to live every day in fear that the people around you might attack you." And I responded, "Okay, is there anyone that you work with right now that you think would attack you?" No, but it's not really about like right now, right here. Okay, so have you ever been attacked in your life for being trans? No, but like other people have. Have you been accosted? Has anyone threatened to attack you in your life personally? No. So then your fear is based off of secondhand stories from, I'm guessing, the news.
Yeah, and they've given her a psychosis, right? I mean, it's almost
it's a real fear.
It's a form of acquired PTSD. I would say, because there are people who have been in situations where that was true, where they were being attacked, or they did have a real legitimate fear that they could be attacked at any moment. And usually that does give people it would be called hypervigilance is the technical term, where you're always on alert. And it's very, very exhausting for people to be in hypervigilant state because your brain just can't be at that level of preparedness at all times. And that is a common aspect of PTSD for people who acquire PTSD through a legitimate reason. What has happened is the media and social media have created these stories where they tell people over and over and over again, you should be scared, you should be scared, you should be scared, you should be scared, you should be scared. And now people are starting to internalize it. And they're acquiring PTSD for events that didn't happen. And they're acquiring that same sense of hypervigilance for events that didn't happen and are very unlikely to happen. Your trans friend is probably much, much, much more likely to be mugged randomly rather than be attacked in a targeted way.
Exactly.
And it's I don't know how we continue moving forward, because there's nothing right now stopping this. Basically, it's like the NPC download of this acquired PTSD that people are getting through illegitimate means. Because I bet you, Dyer, I bet you, your friend, I bet you they really do feel like that. They probably, now it's not a legitimate reason. They don't have a legitimate reason to feel like that, but they probably really are exhausted all the time. They probably are looking over their shoulder all the time.
They really do have the effects.
Yes, and it's because the media and social media have given them this acquired PTSD and essentially made them crazy. PTSD is not a normal functioning of the brain. You have given somebody some kind of psychological scarring, and that can happen naturally and through like a legitimate means, or it can happen just because you talked yourself into it. And that's what's going on, is these people have talked themselves into it.
Yes, and now on the flip side, so you have the media and social media spreading stories of attacks on trans people that don't actually happen, and hyper focusing and amplifying the ones that do actually happen, to make it feel like it's a ever-present threat to their lives that they should be in fear of. At the same time, conservatives actually are attacked on the regular and have to face that there is constant people advocating for violence against them. And they are seeing not a few examples, but many examples, and even mass examples of violence against people like them. And they're told that it's nothing to be concerned about. And
and not only that, they're told, well, it's justified to attack you because you might attack us first. We were told that you might attack us, so of course we had to attack you first. And it creates this self-fulfilling victim narrative where, well, I know that they didn't attack me, but they were gonna attack me because I attacked one of their friends last week, and so I was worried that there'd be blowback, so I had to attack them this week because they might have attacked me because I attacked their friend the week before.
I've been accosted by left-wingers who were yelling angry things at me. Now I wasn't attacked, right? It was just at college, but I actually have an experience where I've come across these illogical, aggressive lefties, whereas the person that I was talking to who was trans had never actually experienced a conservative attacking or accosting them. And I told them, I'm probably your best example of I'm very, very conservative, and I'm not being mean to you. Never have. This isn't the first time I spoke to this person, right? So it doesn't seem like a likelihood. Right? Unless you're going somewhere like looking for it.
Yes. Alrighty. That's your part, Dyer. You ready?
Okay. So the police said that this school was specifically targeted for being the shooter because the shooter was a prior student and had detailed maps of the school. One of the students, Haley Scraggs, so one of the 9-year-olds, was specifically targeted most likely because she was the daughter of a pastor who was the school's pastor, who had been counseling the shooter and had recently had an argument with the school's pastor during counseling session. So they believe that might be one of the motives they picked this school as well, and that she had been executed with a shot to the head in the hallway, that she had been specifically targeted.
Yeah, and I don't know if she was the one, but during the longer video of the body cam footage,
it was her. She
Okay,
was the one that
was
went for the fire alarm. She tried to set it off.
Yeah, so you can see if you watch the longer version of Officer Rex's body cam footage. He's running down the hall, and there's clearly a small body on the floor, and he completely ignores it, which is exactly the right thing to do. He was one of the first people in the door. There's people behind him, and that was tactically exactly what he needed to do. He needed to continue searching for the shooter, and know that the guys behind him were going to render aid if possible. Again, these guys acted basically perfectly, and again, there's a lot of videos with people that are a little bit more tactical than I am, that can break that down for you with all the proper terminology and understanding of what's going on there. That said, that hey, these officers this was like textbook perfect way to do the takedown.
Yep. So ABC's Terry Morgan ties the Nashville school shooting to Tennessee's recently passed. This is one of the many news agencies that tried to put out wrong narratives about what happened, and they tried to. This particular person from ABC News, Terry Morgan, tried to tie Nashville's school shooting to Tennessee's recently passed legislation banning the harmonization and mutilization of minors, the trans surgeries. So the connection, there is no connection to these laws and the shootings. The shooting wasn't. She wasn't someone who was denied treatment. She's 28. She wasn't in any way affected by those laws, who just recently passed. So I think it's a disrespect to the victims, and it's trying to distract from what actually happened by trying to say that these laws.
Let's play the clip here.
All right, that is Police Chief John Drake of Nashville, who is briefing reporters on the deadly grade school shooting in Nashville at the Covenant School there this morning. The police confirming 6 dead, 3 children, 1 8 years old, 2 9 years old, and 3 adults, including Catherine Kuntz, who is the head of the Covenant School. The police chief also said that the shooter has been identified as 28-year-old female Audrey Hale. Said she's a former student of the school, and confirmed that Audrey Hale was identified herself as a transgender person. State of Tennessee earlier this month passed, and the governor signed a bill that banned transgender medical care for minors, as well as a law that prohibited adult entertainment, including male and female impersonators, after a series of drag show controversies in.
That's right. She killed those 8 and 9-year-olds because we can't have little children going to titty bars anymore and seeing dicks get helicoptered in front of their face. That's why.
So violence in response to a political action, right?
Yeah. So we don't know what the manifesto says yet. I suspect the manifesto, when that comes out, will probably affirm a lot of what's being speculated here. But as of right now, we don't know what that is. And I think it's pretty telling that without knowing what the motivations were, the leftist reporters jump right to what they think the motivations would be. And it's a little more telling. Usually when somebody jumps to a conclusion, usually it tells you a lot more about them than it does about the thing that they're jumping to a conclusion about. And I think that, the left, it was a very easy jump for them in their head to say, well, the justification for this is the transgender bills that were just passed. The justification for this is that the state of Tennessee said, hey, you can't show 5-year-olds dicks at strip clubs anymore. Oh no, how terrible. And so you've got this situation where I think of this guy, this Terry Morin. I think in his mind, well, that's a really great justification for it. That makes perfect sense to him, and a lot of leftists, that seems to make perfect sense to them. And again, this wasn't a one-off. This was one of many.
Yes. So what's the next thing we got here?
So Virginia Democrats, they were blasting Republicans with unserious and bad faith attacks, saying that the GOP thinks that drag shows pose a greater threat and a greater physical danger to children than guns do. Well, I don't know about the drag shows, but clearly the performers, they might. I don't know. How do we feel about this ultimatum, Dyer, that you need to let your kids go see a bunch of adult men, stripping, or some leftist is going to come kill them? Like, what's like your ultimatum there?
No, I say in response, how about we ban the drag shows, and then we shoot you when you try coming to shoot our kids?
Yeah, it's I think we'll keep the law as is, and maybe conceal carry a little bit more. A Washington Post contributor also thanked someone who posted that the Christian school in Nashville that was shot up was a religious indoctrination center. So it's okay. I mean, it's basically like somebody went to Auschwitz and shot up the guard shack. Is essentially like what happened here. Is because
it's like you went to Auschwitz and shot the people who were prisoners. That's what you just said. Like, they're an indoctrination center, so it's okay to kill the people being indoctrinated in their opinion.
Yes. In a now deleted tweet, independent reporter and NBC News contributor Benjamin Ryan attempted to correlate the shooting with the fact that the Daily Wire conservative outlet is based in Nashville. He said, quote, "Nashville is home to the Daily Wire, a hub of anti-trans activists by Matt Walsh, Ben Shapiro, and Michael Knowles." And then there was another thing too where I think it was in a TikTok. It was referenced that these kids that the trans shooter killed future fascists, as if to imply that these 8 and 9-year-olds were destined to grow up to be the next Hitler, and that it was in that case it was a good thing that the trans shooter killed them first. So we got a lot of pre-crime going on here. MSNBC opinion writer Hayes Brown published an article titled "6 Are Dead in Nashville. Let's review how the Texas GOP loves guns." Missing the point a little bit here.
Yeah. They did end up changing the title, but they kept the story, which is basically the same.
It's interesting because they'll call people who like guns, you're a gun nut, you're a crazy gun lover, you guys are all and it's like, well, actually, I don't know, your people are clinically crazy. Yes, I do like guns, but I'm not clinically crazy. But your people are. This trans shooter was clinically crazy, as per her. Seeing a doctor about her clinical depression, and the fact that she went on a shooting rampage, I think that's pretty self-evident. I don't know if I have to be a doctor to see that.
No, I think that might be a little antisocial behavior going on there. So the media tripped all over themselves. You may have noticed a few times in some of the clips we played about what it was the shooter's gender and name. Many of them, the first reports coming out of left-wing media referred to her as female and with her original female name, when they had to then release stories later on apologizing for dead naming and using the wrong pronouns, which is pretty funny. So the CBS responded later on with that they were going to be banning transgender in the word transgender in reports on the Nashville transgender school shooter.
Yeah, because it's not important. It's not like white or something like that. It's not like a critical characteristic. So I guess now the only characteristics that you can talk about are if they're white and
yes,
male, identifying as male.
But if they're anything else, If they're straight, you can talk about that. But if they're anything other than straight white male, you can't talk about it because you might encourage violence against that group. But what's it imply when you say that, talking about the color of their skin and their gender or sexuality, that if you talk about it, you say that you are encouraging violence against that group, but you're only allowed to talk about straight white men? What does that mean you are doing? You're encouraging violence against straight white men.
Well, and based off the response of a lot of the soft justification all the way up to like the overt justification of what happened, because, of course, these were future little fascists. It's quite obvious that the effect over the last decade of harping on white men being the only people allowed to be attacked and the only aspect that you're allowed to discuss when they are the attacker, regardless of what their ideology was, that clearly has had the effect that they're worried about having on trans people. Well, if you talk about that the shooter was trans, you might encourage violence against trans people. And they know that because they were very effective in doing that against white men, where they have done all these things and said all these things, and they've encouraged violence, and it seems self-evident that there's been violence against white men because of that. And so, yeah, they're probably worried about it because I don't know. That's what they did. It's not necessarily even what works or what they do. They're always worried about doing what they know themselves are doing.
What you could do to make sure there isn't a encouraging of violence against a certain group is if you mention everyone exactly the same, you don't hide certain groups and highlight other groups, then there wouldn't be a preference toward one group or another. But if you're only mentioning one group's characteristics, then you are encouraging it.
Oh, so you mean you should just do like equal reporting?
Yeah. So just say the truth.
Equally.
Okay, so following the shooting, left-wing trans activists responded by going on a national Trans Day of Vengeance, which was scheduled to start 4 days after the shooting.
The vengeance because the little children they killed the trans person, right?
It wasn't a Christian group that was going on to a Christian Day of Vengeance against trans people killing their kids. No, it was a Trans Day of Vengeance to get vengeance for a trans person going to a school and shooting up Christian kids. Right. And also it corresponded with the new holiday that Joe Biden created, which was supposed to be the Trans Day of Visibility. It started on the same day, which was Friday, and ends on today, Sunday.
Am I playing this clip?
Yep.
All right.
This was the
Check out what
trans
happened
activists
at
storming
the Tennessee Capitol a little while ago.
By golly, that looks like an insurrection.
Yeah.
No action, no peace. 4
Sounds like a
days
threat.
after one of their own murdered a bunch of 9-year-olds. I guess they're not done.
They're not even calling for justice anymore. They're saying, do the action we're demanding, or we are going to harm you.
Yeah, so we're I mean, everybody's pretty familiar with the that formula of no justice, no peace, no something, no peace. Well, I mean, what is the logical end to that rhetoric? I think a reasonable understanding of that is that you're talking about political movements. You're going to be causing problems politically, that we're not talking about violence, that they're not talking about violence. But more and more, people on the left are actually going crazy. You have a lot of reports every year about whose side has the most mental health issues, and it's always the left has way higher preponderance of mental health issues. And so you have a crazy person that hears something that a rational person like Dyer and I hear, and it's like, okay, yeah, that's pretty steep rhetoric, but it's rhetoric. I don't think it quite crosses the boundary of a call to action. Not quite. It's up there though. But then you have an unreasonable person, a leftist. There's also a report that came out about 2 weeks ago that we didn't cover last week that showed that Zennials and Gen Zers they are actually like more stupid, like provably more stupid than previous generations. Every generation of America, people have been getting smarter because of new technology, better education systems, better nutrition, and something happened with the most recent generation of Gen Z, and they're like 5 to 10 IQ points stupider than millennials, like on average, which is that's a lot. That's like a whole standard deviation of stupiderness. Like that's a lot of brain power that they don't have. And so you combine the left, where in general everybody's just getting a little bit stupider, and then the left is also a little bit crazy, which is a really great combination of being a little bit crazy and a little bit stupid. And then you hear no justice, no peace. And you think to yourself, I'm going to go buy a Caltech and kill some 8-year-olds. That's what happens. That's the problem. Unfortunately, not that I'm not believing in the First Amendment anymore, but unfortunately, the First Amendment does not seem to work out real well when you have a stupid population or a crazy population. It may be that rhetoric that could be heard by the average citizen might not be okay anymore. It might set them off. And I don't know that we can or even should do anything about that, but it's something to keep in mind when they're saying no justice, no peace. Well, it seems that the shooter that killed a bunch of school children sounds like they took the no peace part to heart. And
so the only solution to that is if that you can't prevent. You can't take away the free speech, and you can't prevent these crazy people who've been broken for life from responding to that speech. But what we can do is make sure that every person has the ability to defend themselves and remove them from the world if they choose to do so.
Yeah, there is there's a pretty big push against kind of from the deeper conservative side. There's kind of a push back against individualism and libertarianism, saying like no, like we're more of a community and everything's got to be community and stuff like that. And I get that to a certain extent. And it's pretty obvious that the family unit still has to be the core of both things. But relying on your community, relying on your neighbors, it's really great when you can do that, and you should make an attempt at creating that community if it doesn't already exist in your area. But at the end of the day, when somebody's hunting down your kid in their school, only really you can do something about that. You in the moment, if somebody's attacking you or your family, only you are able to do something about that. Your community is great, but you have to have you have to maintain the right to be armed. That the Second Amendment cannot be negotiable. Regardless of what the state of the rest of the country is or how stupid or crazy the rest of your citizens are, you have to maintain that right. It is paramount. And you have to be willing to exercise that right when necessary. That is, at the end of the day, that is what's going to keep you safe in a situation. Now, to hopefully prevent that situation from happening in the first place, that's where we're talking about building community. And knowing your neighbors and being involved in your city government and taking an interest in what's going on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, everybody keep letting this play out, or is it just the?
That's it. That's enough. Oh wait, did we get to a minute yet?
No, we didn't.
Hang on there. It looked like those demonstrators stormed the Capitol chamber. Was that also an insurrection? No, not hardly, you see, because that action was being taken by gun control demonstrators, a Democrat-friendly cause, and therefore it couldn't be the I word, insurrection. In fact, the reporter who filmed that first bit of footage you saw deleted her tweet when people started making the comparison to January 6th, because, you can't have people getting too close to the truth, can you? Of course, that demonstration was in the wake of a terrible crime committed in Nashville, Tennessee this week.
I like Australians. I feel bad for them because they're very clearly I don't know, like they're like Americans in waiting kind of a thing, but they're like living under a totalitarian government.
Yeah.
And they would never be allowed to say these sorts of things about their own government. And their outlet is by doing commentary on U.S. politics. So that seems to be a balance for them being able to be their true selves, and also not running afoul of their government mandates.
But their listeners know, like, can make the relation. Oh, well, if it's crazy over there, then what they're doing here is also crazy. So.
All right, let's power through the rest of this. So we only had 2 stories, and we're somehow at almost 2 hours. Come on, Dyer.
So Chad Krug's the father, one of the children, and we talked about before from the Nashville shooting. Was the pastor who was counseling her and providing private counseling. Another assistant pastor was one of the sources for how we knew this. Former Covenant school pastor Jim Bachman says the shooter appeared to be searching for Scruggs when she went through the school. She shot Scruggs' 9-year-old daughter dead, and the Inside Edition reported. The FBI say that they are going to release the shooter's manifesto, which will, of course, shed more light on why she did this. But the date has not been released of the release has not been made certain yet. We probably will do a part of another show about anything that comes out of that manifesto, but I'm not expecting it to be anything different from what we've already been telling you is most likely the reason for why she did it. A friend of the
left
shooter,
will take other shooters of manifestos, they're just being monkeys on keyboards, like banging on the keyboard kind of a thing, and the left will twist anything into saying, this proves that it's right-wing violence, even though it'll be communist manifesto word for word, and they'll say, well, this proves that he was a Trump voter, right-winger. And I think probably with this manifesto, I'm gonna guess it'll be really, really hard to make that argument, even for how they're gonna twist it. And
if you take every fifth word, it might sound like something conservative.
I think that I think the public deserves to know. Not necessarily. So somebody, I heard the point be made that there's a difference between the public being able to know information and the media boosting the information. And the difference is, as everybody kind of knows what the shooter's name was, but the media doesn't need to boost the name. We don't need to have a Rolling Stone highly photoshopped picture of her on the cover with her name in big bold letters. We don't need to have the media reading every little part of the manifesto and highlighting the parts that align with their political system. But it should be made available to the public that if you choose to go out and find it, you can find it.
Yes. So a friend of the shooter saw a message a message on Instagram from the shooter saying that she was about to die and that people would see it on the news. This was minutes before the shooting. The friend tried very hard to report the message to the suicide hotline and to the police, but got the runaround being sent to different phone numbers and having to wait on hold to pass the message.
Whoever sent her to hold, they should be the ones put on trial for. Obviously, there's not going to be a trial because the shooter's dead, but I would say that in lieu of other evidence, if you're a 911 operator and somebody's telling you about a school shooting and you're giving them the runaround, then I can only assume that you are a co-conspirator in the shooting.
Part of the problem was she said, I know it's this person. I don't know their full name. I don't know where they live. I just know that they said that they're going to kill themselves and they're going to be on the news for doing it. And that there's a little more information, but essentially it was very obvious the shooter wanted to die infamous.
And so we've got this, so she sent it over Instagram, and the FBI has this, infinite search engine on the backsides of all the social media companies. Mm-hmm. And they can use that to track down your grandma in Alaska. She's 97 years old because she took a picture of the Capitol building one time 20 years ago. They can use social media to track her down and arrest her for January 6th. But You call into the local police and say, hey, this person I know on the internet, which is extremely common these days, hey, they're going to go do something violent. And all of a sudden, well, how could we possibly track this person down? It's just not possible. It's impossible. There's no way to do it. There's no way to call the FBI hotline, which the FBI has rapid response teams available. And there's no way that, calling the FBI hotline, there's no way that they could call the people who have access to the search engine on the backside of Facebook and Instagram. And gosh, they couldn't possibly use that to track down this person's IP address and find them. I'll just ignore it, and I'm not going to make any attempt at doing this. I'm going to tell the person calling that, they need to stop calling because it's my lunch hour. That's what I'm going to do. I'm not for the surveillance state, but by God, if we've got the surveillance state and we're not using it to protect kids, that was the entire reason for it. The entire justification for the surveillance state is, well, we have to have it to protect your kids.
No, it's for hunting down conservatives and protecting the state.
That's why it's so easy to argue against. At least make it hard. At least make it difficult to argue against the surveillance state. Say, well, they saved a bunch of kids. We get told that they save kids all the time. We get told that they're stopping all these terror attacks, and then we find out that all these terror attacks were planned by the FBI to start with.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about who's to blame and why they did what they did, but let's talk
Michael Knowles.
Yeah, obviously this is very disqualifying for DeSantis.
It is.
So let's talk a little bit about how we can prevent this in the future, because that's really, if you're going to have a tragedy like this, it's really important that even though they did a good job at responding, that we look at why it happened and how we can prevent it from happening, because if you're going to take anything positive out of such a terrible tragedy, you have to learn something, right? So guns were not the problem. They were the solution. An AR was used to kill the target. If those three adults had firearms, they had warning to arm themselves, and they could have stopped the killer, and 0 kids could have died. But they were unarmed, and they were easy targets.
And it doesn't have to be, again, people, they always conflate this, oh, well, you're going to force teachers to have, no one's forcing anybody to have guns. We're just saying that there exists a right under the Constitution. And what's wild to me is that the government-run school system, somehow they're exempt from the Constitution. Huh? I would say that the government is the most covered by, having a government job is most covered by the Constitution. But you're telling me that in a school that large, there's got to be at least somebody. I know that they've tried very hard to filter out all the conservatives, but there's somebody in that school who is capable and willing to possess a firearm. And so it doesn't have to be that the principal throws herself at the shooter.
Ask the principal if she would rather have had a gun.
Or rather that she knew that, maybe she's not comfortable with having a gun. And that's fine. It's not for everybody. There are people who aren't comfortable with it. And it'd be great if we could get more people comfortable with it. But maybe she's got a teacher. Maybe she's got, the gym teacher or something like that. He's a little more comfortable. He's a little more rugged. And he hears the siren, and he immediately runs to where he needs to go to and attempts to make a first contact with the shooter, rather than just nothing. You just have nothing. I don't know. Go ahead, Dyer.
Okay. The next thing was the entrance to the school was only the entrance by the shooter to the school was only possible because the school had glass doors, full glass doors, no crossbars that would prevent. Like I can understand you having a door that has glass panes, but also has the strong metal cross beams that prevent you from walking through it. Security doors. The doors were locked. The school was in lockdown. But the doors were full panes of glass that could easily be shot through, and that's how the shooter got into the building. There's a video of that if you want to show it, but I think we showed it earlier already.
We did.
Another thing,
move on.
A person with this situation was a person with a severe psychological disorder that regularly leads to self-harm and violence of others, who was put on some sort of medication, not known what it is, possibly to treat depression, but it was for emotional instability and emotional problems. And that person was allowed to have firearms. Now, I do not support red flag laws. However, I do very much suspect that this person's first act of violence or first threat wasn't shooting up a school. And over again, when we have these school shootings, we find out later on that the person had violent criminal acts that predicated the actual shooting that were not reported. I'm guessing the reason why that she is being treated for emotional disorders is because she has done something in the past that wasn't reported.
Yeah, and that's on whoever didn't report it. Dyer and I, we've talked before. I know I did a whole segment a few years ago when, who's eye patch guy from Texas, that congressperson. You know who I'm talking about. Who am I talking about?
Solid Snake.
Huh?
Solid Snake.
What's his real name?
Fucking.
I don't know. He's not doing real hot either. That's why I don't remember his name anymore. Not Ron DeSantis. Eye patch guy. He came out and he supported red flag laws. And he was in the military, so you got to take him seriously. We did I think I did like an hour and a half breakdown one night on that. And we went through all of his points and kind of went through them one by one. I know a lot of people wanted to say let's just dismiss this offhand, and that's fine. I thought it deserved going through each point by point, and we did. And it didn't sell it to me. I wasn't sold. I still thought red flag laws were bad, and I think we both still do. But if there are red flag laws, regardless of if they're good or not, if there's any law, regardless of if it's good or not, it has to be applied equally. We have to have equality under the law. Part of being in a Republican form of government is that there's going to be laws that you don't necessarily agree with. But you can take some consolation in the law has to be applied equally. And we are continuing to advocate that red flag laws not be put in place, that existing red flag laws be rescinded. But until that time, the only way that our system works is that there's equality under the law. If they're going to use red flag laws against military veterans who don't like fireworks, then you got to use them against trannies who are taking God knows what kind of horse derivative hormones and Xanaxes. You got to do the same thing for them. It has to be for both. It can't just, we cannot live in a system where the left is authoritarians and they're continuing to come up with all of these laws, ever more regulations, volumes and volumes of new regulations every year. And they use them against Republicans, against conservatives. And then the conservatives say, well, we don't want to use them against you. We don't want to use these laws and regulations against the leftists because, well, we don't support them. And then all of a sudden, there's none of us left. We're all either in jail or we're not able to run or whatever, and they just get to roll over us.
One of the ways that laws are kept in check is they are applied evenly, because if a bad law or a bad policy is passed and then everyone is affected by it, even the people who passed it, and they realize, oh, we're being negatively affected by this thing too, it helps to check those laws and get them undone. Because, but if it's the party in power is not affected by it and only the minority party is affected by it, then they're not going to be, they don't have that incentive to undo it.
And, it's easy to look at this after the fact and say, okay, well, she should have been red flagged. Well, we know after the fact that she's, a nut and that she shouldn't have had guns. We didn't know that beforehand.
Maybe there was
maybe there was. And that's one of the issues. That's one of the reasons why we don't support red flag laws generally, is because it's very easy and obvious to identify who should have been red flagged after the fact. It's not as easy to identify who should have been red flagged before the fact. And there's a lot of evidence that is just used frivolously. And so, you can look at this and have a gut reaction saying, she shouldn't have been able to have guns and we should have used this law. And that is right now is not the time to be crafting new legislation for red flag laws that would have hopefully got this, particular individual bound up before she got the guns. I think the focus has to be on, because again, it's not possible to have
Dan
that perfect
Crenshaw.
knowledge. What's that?
It was the guy you were talking about was Dan Crenshaw.
Dan Crenshaw. That almost doesn't even sound familiar. I don't know if I would have come up with that after like 2 hours.
Thank you, Trevor.
That's how like irrelevant he's become, because he was really cool, and he rode that into Congress being cool, and then now he is kind of a dork.
So let's
I don't like
summarize. I think they should have actual security doors that can't be easily shot through. I think they should have armed personnel, either a police officer. There's lots of military guys that are retired from the military that would love that job, just be a security officer at a school. Or a police officer, regular police officer, have someone armed at the school that can respond quicker. And it's not a novel idea. There are schools that have these officers. There was one in Texas where they responded within less than a minute. I think it was like 30 seconds.
I don't know the accuracy of it because we didn't research it before. But I did see a kind of a quick napkin math on Twitter last week that the cost for like a year salary of putting all the a resource officer, that's an armed resource officer, in every single school in America, that it would be quite substantially less than what we just sent Ukraine just this year. And so if we were willing to, I don't know, fight in Ukraine every year, but defending our kids. Well, what is the point of the government if not to spend money on protecting your kids? I mean, we're doing it to protect Ukrainians, I guess, or I guess to pad the pockets of people who have businesses in Ukraine. But all of a sudden, when it comes to like the kids of the citizens of America, all of a sudden it's like, well, the money's not infinite here. When it comes to defending Ukraine's borders, we'll print and print and print. When it comes to defending our borders, the money coffers aren't infinite.
There was one guy who posted saying that we could send all of the guns we have in America, all our ARs, to Ukraine, and Ukraine would be safe. And I think that's funny because you're making the argument that an armed populace is safer from being invaded, that every citizen around the world should have an AR.
Well, the alternative read on that. The alternative read on that is that he thinks that all Ukrainians are virtuous and that all Americans are evil.
Right,
which is,
that's
probably leftist ideology too.
Yeah, I believe that. Also, in California, back when I was going through the school system, 80% of the budget went to the administrative cost of the schools and not actually the buying of materials and educational aids and the paying of teachers.
Well, yeah, it's not cheap to have a six-figure diversity and inclusion officer. Those departments are really expensive.
So 80% of the budget has nothing to do with actually running the school or its teachers. So how about we take some of that gigantic budget and just pay resource officers and maybe fire a few of the school administrators that have pointless jobs?
I agree.
All right, let's move on to our next story.
Alrighty.
We're on story A now.
Yeah, so Trump got indicted! Finally. Finally.
Indicted. So
Trump
we
got
actually can
indicted.
talk about the reality of him being indicted and not a hypothetical.
Well, there's not much to talk about because the indictment was, I believe it was leaked, and also like they haven't arrested him or arraigned him yet, though he's suspected to be arraigned next week, which means he will be potentially arrested. DeSantis came out with a strong statement that he would not be, the state of Florida would not be participating in any extradition, which is great. Again, a lot of people were upset at DeSantis because DeSantis would not respond firmly to an event that hadn't happened, that was based off of another series of Jenga Tower events that never had happened yet. Now all of those events have happened. They've actually happened. And DeSantis came out and strongly supported it. Now you guys might be thinking, Fox, you're wrong because you were so forceful last week that this hadn't happened yet, and well, now it did happen. Don't you feel silly? And I do feel really silly because if Dyer and I had come out early and said that Trump was going to get arrested a full week before he was even indicted, if we had done that, we would have helped prevent the indictment from even happening, because that's what happened. Is everybody who talked about Trump getting arrested early without any real reason to suspect that. They actually they caused the jury to not indict Trump at all. Oh wait, he still got indicted. Oh, okay. So
Sure.
people
We like to talk about things that actually happen and not hypotheticals.
Yes. And not even necessarily just not hypotheticals, but like hypotheticals that are like many other subsequent hypotheticals removed. There's a lot of stuff that happened last week and a lot of stuff that happened this week. It is a big deal. We'll see what happens next week. If Trump even gets arrested or what he's going to do with that. There's a lot of people want to talk either side of what he should do. A lot of people, foaming at the mouth excited about civil war, all of that stuff. It's a lot of speculation. I think with our next story after this Trump indictment story here, coming up here in a few minutes, I am having a really, really hard time focusing on something that Trump did 7 to 20 years ago, because the original thing was from like 2005. I'm having a really, really hard time getting super invested in something that happened like 10 to 20 years ago with Trump, and getting involved in, was the 2016 election stolen or the 2020 election stolen, and all of these like past things that like Trump is annoyed about, and even things that the left is unfairly not equally applying the law and unfairly going after Trump about. These are problems. However, it's really, really hard to get super invested in these things until tangible events happen, until it's tangible that, I don't know, there's some kind of firefight between the New York sheriffs and Trump's Secret Service, or like they put Trump in that bad prison in DC, or in that bad prison in New York. Was it Rikers Island? Until that happens, it's really, really hard to spend a lot of time speculating about that or becoming super invested in it. Again, it's bad. It's an overreach of power. They shouldn't have done it. They really, a good DOJ and possibly a future DOJ will indict the DA of New York for abusing his power. That should probably happen. But spending hours and hours and hours talking about it, Dyer and I just can't do that. It's when stuff happens, we will talk about it. But at this point, we have brought you the amount of information that is available. That Trump was indicted. Last week, I said that he was not going to be indicted in the week previous, and he wasn't. And I said at the end of the show last week, I said, he may well get indicted next week, and he did. He did. So Dyer and I were correct. We are still correct. And people who were wrong now are saying, they're using this to say, well, we were right all along. We knew about it. But what they were saying before this was last week, they said, well, the only reason why he didn't get indicted is because we talked about it early. And then now they're saying after he got indicted, well, we were right. So you got a lot of people who talked about this early. They spent a tremendous amount of time talking about it, talking about nothing really. And I don't know, they have this like self-fulfilled prophecy that they're correct. I would be mindful to watch out for that, because while it's important, it's a big deal. It's not the most big deal. It's not the most important. And it doesn't require talking about it for the hundreds of hours that have been talked about the last 2 weeks. And that is because of our next story here. Dyer, do you have anything else to say before we get on to our next much more important story?
I do not.
All right.
I do not.
Do you feel silly for being
Right.
wrong? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, you were right, but really you were wrong, technically, but not really.
Let's get
Fact
on to the
check
next
false.
story, which is far more important.
Okay.
Right now.
So, Dyer, do you know things? Do you
I know
what
a lot of things about certain subjects.
you do? Do you know what the petrodollar is?
Yes, I do.
Can you give like a brief description of the petrodollar? And I can even help you out. If you jump to where I'm highlighting, you don't even have to come up with it out of your head.
Okay. Oh my God, that's a lot. Okay, so That's gonna be way more than what I was gonna say. But anyway, so
you can just paraphrase. I'll jump
so,
to that later.
The petrodollar basically is all the countries have agreed to exchange gasoline, to buy and sell gasoline using the U.S. dollar, which means they need our currency in large amounts to do large exchanges of large. Not exchange, but when you do a purchase or something, it's a large
purchases.
No, it's like buying and selling. Anyway, whatever.
Trade.
Trade between nations. Some nations, their entire economy is being predominantly based on the selling of oil transactions. Thank you. So they need our currency. And it helps prop up our economy because our money is being bought used for this very valuable asset. And our economy very much depends on. It's one of the major pillars of our economy is that everyone depends on using the U.S. dollar. Yeah. And if they didn't, then our money would no longer be used in those transactions. It would come back to the States and cause a whole lot of inflation, which would destroy our economy.
Basically. Now, a lot of people have been upset, and rightfully so, that the U.S. dollar is not backed by gold any longer. However, it's in theory basically been backed by oil for the last 50 years because a single U.S. dollar is readily exchangeable for oil everywhere in the world. Now, us as Americans don't really got to worry about that very often, but for the rest of the world, from a nation's perspective, the perspective of other governments throughout the world, the U.S. dollar is readily exchangeable for oil, which means the U.S. dollar is backed by not by a lump of shiny yellow metal, but backed by energy, which is actually much more better than gold. And maybe if maybe if the powers that be had taken some time to explain that to us and actually held to it, maybe we'd be in a more confident place right now. However,
it's important to note that the fact that our dollar has been propped up by the petrodollar, the fact that that is what has allowed us to not being a producer economy, but be a very big consumer economy. And so that way of our economy would need to change drastically for it to survive if we no longer had the petrodollar.
Yes. So that is just a little bit of prologue to what we're about to talk about here, followed by a sequel to the prologue, and then we'll get into the actual story. So don't underestimate Joe's ability to fuck things up. That was Obama's warning to us when he heard that Biden was running for office. Old Barry, he didn't get a whole lot right, but he does seem to have nailed that one about Biden. And as bad as Joe has made things for us here at home, the things he seems to have fucked up the most is America's standing on the world stage.
So in the lead up to 2020 election, the general election, we heard endless claims without evidence about how embarrassing it is having Trump represent America on the world stage. I was never really that embarrassed. I thought he really represented us really well. Biden was supposed to represent a return to American greatness, which is ironic because America was greater under Trump. The adults were back in charge with Biden, though. In reality, once Joe took office, it took less than a year for the Taliban to take over all of Afghanistan, and just a little bit more than a year for Putin to invade Ukraine. The North Koreans restarted their ICBM program, ISIS reformed, and China has filled the gaps that Biden has left with our allies and surrogates. Subjugates.
How
close. The fuck did I mess that up?
I know, we practiced that one before we went live. It's all right. So a lot of things have happened around the world this week. Obviously, the most important one was that Trump got indicted, right? I mean, there's really no reason to talk about anything else. But probably you might be getting some hint as to why the Trump story was made into such a big deal. It was to distract you. So a lot of things happened this week, and all of them were directly bad to you and directly bad to your safety as an American citizen, mostly due to that linkage of the petrodollar that Dyer was just talking about. But let's start off first with this graph. And this graph explains quite a lot about the Biden doctrine. Every president has their doctrine for how to handle foreign policy, and I think this chart neatly highlights the Biden doctrine. So what this chart is in red, that is the amount of trade that China is sending to Russia, and in blue is the amount of trade that China is receiving from Russia. And you can see, there's, 2015 up to 2020, just kind of a little bit more every year. Everything's a little bit more every year. That's how stuff goes. And all of a sudden something happened in 2021, and all of a sudden their trade shot way up. Suddenly they're doing a lot of stuff together. They're very cozy together. And, maybe you're thinking, maybe it was COVID. Maybe that's why they got together. And you'd be wrong, because it's not COVID that got the dragon and the bear so cozy together. You can clearly see that in 2020, the first full year of COVID, that trade between China and Russia actually dropped slightly. So no, it wasn't until 2021 that something happened. Something happened that caused trade between China and Russia to spike by almost 50%, and then steadily rise the year after that, and we're on track in 2023 to have an even higher year. That something that happened was Joe Biden. And that cozy relationship between our new Cold War enemies, along with many other idiotic disasters, both foreign and domestic, that Biden has caused, has set the stage for all of the terrible things that happened to us this week. It's terrible, terrible things. All right. Dyer, do you want to read the first terrible thing that happened to us this week?
Sure. So on March 28th, Brazil and China, two members of the increasingly influential BRICS alliance, announced an agreement to conduct all future trade transactions using their own currencies. China ranks as Brazil's biggest trade partner.
This is also sort of related to a story from earlier in the month, where Reuters reported that Indian customs have paid for most of their Russian oil in non-dollar denominated currencies, including the United Arab Emirates, Dhahram, and more recently the Russian ruble. Multiple oil trading and banking resources have said. So you have a lot of these countries in the BRICS alliance are starting to talk to each other. The trade is the way countries talk to each other. They're starting to talk to each other in currencies that are not the American dollar. And the American petrodollar, while mostly useful for trading in oil, because all oil is denominated in dollars, it's also easy to exchange dollars between countries. There's a lot of financial infrastructure that is set up to exchange dollars around the world. And so a lot of countries like to exchange in dollars because it's easier. And suddenly it's not as easy. There's other currencies that seem to be catching their eye. Let's see. You also had on March 28th, the French oil giant Total Energies announced that it had completed its first purchase of liquefied natural gas from a Chinese oil company using the Chinese yuan as the settling currency. Mm-hmm. Another big transaction not settled in dollars.
The French, supposedly an ally. So yes. On March 29th, Saudi Arabia announced it has agreed to become a dialogue partner in the Shanghai Corporation.
Maybe Shanghai. Actually, I think it's Shanghai.
So it's Shanghai. Oh, it's Shanghai Corporation.
That's what it just
Organization.
said.
So and their name is Corporation Organization, which I think is funny. Shanghai Corporation Organization. Okay. A China-led political, economic, and security organization designed to compete with similar Western organizations. This latest indication of strengthening ties between Saudi Arabia and China came just weeks after the kingdom and Iran announced an agreement to reestablish diplomatic relations that had been brokered by China. Now, the U.S. has been under Trump and before, but not with Biden, had been doing a lot of lucrative trade with Saudi Arabia and a lot of cooperation with them in return for them cutting off ties with Iran and not working with China. They basically have the option of they need to be receiving money and selling to one of the big economies in the world, and their options were either the U.S. Western Bloc or the Asian Bloc, Russia, China, Iran, and India, and they had to choose. And we were giving them a good deal, so they were sticking with us. That means they're going to help us militarily and economically. Biden broke off ties with them and insulted their kingdom, and accused them of
all
things.
Because some that Jamal Khashoggi guy that the leftists really like, and he was a radical Muslim Brotherhood terrorist sympathizer who happened to be like a byline writer every now and then for the New York Times, not like a full-time employee at the New York Times, just like he would send an article into the New York Times every now and then. The editors would look it over and they would publish it under his name, which is a common thing that all the media outlets do, where they have like not full-time writers, but guest writers or, affiliate writers. And this Jamal Khashoggi, not a great thing that the Prince of Saudi Arabia, had him killed and cut into little tiny pieces in the consulate and, shipped out in barrels and stuff like that. Not the best thing to happen. Anyways, he's a bad dude. But the left, man, they love this Muslim Brotherhood terrorist sympathizer so much because he worked for the New York Times and they all have pea brains, that actually morphed into a Joe Biden foreign policy that we were going to shun one of the biggest oil producing countries in the world and one of the most strategic countries in the Middle East. Not necessarily an ally, but better.
It wasn't about being an ally, though.
Huh?
It wasn't. The purpose wasn't to have them be our ally.
Yeah, it was to have them not be our enemy and not to join with our other enemies.
We were using them because Trump was smart. He was using Saudi Arabia for a couple main initiatives. First, he wanted to slow or stop Iran from getting nuclear weapons, because if they get them, they're the type of people who might use them for a crazy reason. Second, he wanted to keep the petrodollar, keep our influence over one of the biggest oil producers. If they're dependent on us because of other things, we're locked in a relationship with them, then they're not going to stop using the petrodollar. Also, they will make economic decisions with their oil that will be beneficial to us. We want them to be
Biden threw that all away because, I don't know, some New York Times readers were upset that one of the bylines was gone forever.
It had nothing to do with Trump or us thinking that Saudi Arabia or having any delusion that they are led by good people or they are a modern, civilized society. That there's no delusions of that. They were being used using the idea of a mutually beneficial economic transaction. We were using them through that transaction to get what we wanted, which was to protect our interest and our people. Giving up that interest for the sake of making a moral grandstanding statement about being opposed to a country doing political killings, which, I mean, a lot of countries that are not our country are doing that, and
even our country does that sometimes.
And even when our country is doing it under Biden, it's kind of hard to take the moral high ground when you're putting your own citizens in solitary confinement for simply being opposed to your regime. So what was the point of that grandstanding? Did they look more moral than the people they're criticizing? I think it's far more beneficial to protect us from nuclear holocaust and also ensure that our economy doesn't collapse because of the loss of the petrodollar. I think those are far more important.
Well, I think you're not thinking about all of the New York Times subscribers.
I think Trump was far more forward-minded than Biden is.
Yes, and it doesn't end there. So all these are examples of the U.S. Losing the international setup that we had set up for a reason, China moving in to fill in those gaps, and then all of these different countries starting to settle trade, especially trade for energy, in not U.S. dollars. Today, April 2nd, actually this morning, Japan broke a G7 agreement, and they have begun buying Russian oil at a rate. Yes, that happened this morning. It was announced this morning. So there was a G7 agreement that you could buy oil from Russia if you were a Western G7 country, but you couldn't pay Russia any more than $60 per barrel. We were going to haircut the heck out of Russia, and they just, they'd have to deal with it. Well, Russia said, well, we're not going to sell it for $60 a barrel. Go fuck yourself. And so Japan, they really like oil, as most countries do. And so they have broken the G7 agreement, and they are now buying Russian oil at market price. They did that this morning. Wow. And at least for now, they are buying it in dollars.
Yay.
And then we also know that obviously this is not a recent story, but we know that Germany has been buying as much energy from Russia as they possibly can. Biden tried to slow that down when, I don't know, he sent a tranny after the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. But we know that Germany. So the G7 alliance is not really the best. We've with friends like these. So we have a lot of people just not excited about how America is conducting itself. We are basically have lost. I mean, could you summarize just how screwed up in such a short amount of time Biden has messed up the Middle East? Like, we've had stuff set up and orchestrated, chess pieces moved around, and very carefully crafted negotiations over lifetimes, like decades. And Biden wiped it all out in a matter of months.
We had a network of an intelligence network with thousands and thousands of assets across the Middle East that were helping to warn us of threats and to respond to threats. We lost that. We lost bases that gave us areas of influence where we could do air operations and quickly respond to threats. We lost that.
Just in Afghanistan and Iraq, just the rollback of all the progress that we made there, the resurgence of ISIS, the resurgence of the Taliban, essentially lost complete control of those regions.
Now all these oil-rich countries have strong relationships and ties with Russia and not us. So they're going to make economic decisions that are going to benefit Russia and hurt us intentionally.
Yep. And so now that you heard all of those things that happened this week, all of those things that are very bad for your petrodollar, maybe now you know why everybody was spending hours and hours and hours and hours and hours speculating about what may or may not happen to Trump. 18 to 20, might have beens down the line there.
Those are easy to talk about.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to talk about, and it's it's of very little consequence to you tomorrow. Some of the things that happened today, that's a very high consequence to you tomorrow. This, we talk a lot about the how does a country collapse, and the joke and the reality is it's slowly at first and then very suddenly. The tipping point that could cause this to happen very suddenly, and it's not even a could be, it would definitely cause it to become very suddenly, would be the loss of the petrodollar. If you start having these large nations, and these are very large nations, you got Brazil, you've got India, China, Russia, Japan's not a big physical country, but they're a huge energy consumer. You get these large countries, large energy consumers start transacting not in dollars, you will overnight start seeing problems. It might take a week or two for the prices to get updated on the the gas stations or your grocery store, but you will, over the course of about a month, really come to understand what you had been taking for granted with the petrodollar. And that could happen very, very quickly. And so this is a really big deal. All right.
Yeah. Do you want to read this still?
Yeah. So just to give you a little bit more history about the petrodollar, where it came from, kind of what it does and why it does. I know Dyer talked about this a little bit But just to kind of give us a more firm understanding of where it came from, I have this excerpt from Forbes, which kind of gave a little bit of a mini history lesson on what this was.
Okay. So while a high percentage of international crude oil trades had long been conducted in U.S. currency, the petrodollar was more formally established as a global currency of mark for such trades in 1973 in the wake of the first Arab oil embargo. Then the Richard Nixon administration executed an agreement with the Saudi Arabian prince Fawn Ilden Aziz, in which the Saudi kingdom agreed to conduct its oil trades in U.S. dollars in exchange for U.S. military support and hardware. What we're doing with the Arab Emirates of Israel, the UAE. But Biden stopped. The establishment of this agreement between what at the time were the largest buyers of crude oil, the United States, and the largest exporter of the product, Saudi Arabia, created a paradigm that other importing and exporting nations quickly began to follow. Since that time, a strong majority of the international oil trades were traditionally been conducted in U.S. currency, i.e. the petrodollar. Today, even amid global tensions, shifting international trade arrangements, and a spate of new deals to conduct transactions in competing currencies like the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan, a recent analysis by PhD economist Anas Alaji, managing partner of Energy Outlook Advisors, points out that fully 60% of official foreign exchange reserves conducted in Q1 of 2022 were transacted using U.S. dollars, according to the IMF data. Alaji adds, yes, with the rise of the euro, Japan's yen, and Chinese yuan, the U.S. dollar lost some ground, but here is the shocker. Based on the most recent data from the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the U.S. dollar's share is where it was in 1995.
So as a share of world trade, it sounds like we're still holding our ground in U.S. dollars. However, world trade is it's all very nice and stuff, but the world trade of, I don't know, your Lululemon pants or the toy in your McDonald's bag that you gave your kids, or your crappy iPhone, that is not as interesting or as effective as a thing to trade in dollars as it is for oil, for energy. Those are things that you make with energy. And it's good that some of them are transacted in dollars, and it's good that we're holding at steady rates of those things, those international goods, those created goods being transacted in dollars. But it is because that energy, oil, is primarily transacted in dollars. If that starts slipping, which it is, then the power of the dollar is going to start slipping. And a lot of those things, a lot of those extra goods and services that are transacted in dollars, those are transacted in dollars only because other countries have a demand for dollars, because they have a demand for oil, and they can only buy the oil, or they could only buy the oil, in dollars. If all of a sudden you don't need dollars to buy oil, which is happening this week, well, then you don't need to start pricing all of your other goods and services in dollars. You don't need to price the iPhone in dollars, because who cares? You don't need dollars. You can just use the Chinese yuan. So why not price the iPhone in yuan? You will see a lot of other things, a lot of other issues, a lot of the problems that will happen will be directly caused by people not needing dollars anymore. And what happens when you don't need dollars? There's a surplus of dollars. What happens when there's a surplus of dollars? The value goes down.
Exactly.
And you combine this with the story that we talked about last week, where we were explaining how the Fed has created this new credit swap line system to basically directly print money into Europe, where they're going to do quantitative easing for Europe in dollars, but not quantitative easing for us. So they're printing, for now, hundreds of millions, but soon to be probably tens of, and then hundreds of billions of U.S. dollars and pumping them into Europe. And I said, that's going to end up being bad for us because eventually those dollars are going to compete with our dollars for oil. And so it's going to drive up the price of oil, which is bad. However, I might have been wrong about that because they might not need to use those dollars to buy oil because maybe oil is going to be priced in some other currency. And then all of a sudden they don't need those dollars. And so what do they do with them? Well, they're going to have to buy something with them. And where's a good place to spend dollars? Well, America's a good place to spend dollars because a lot of our stuff here is priced in dollars. And so it'll actually create an even worse inflation. Now, having the inflation before was going to be bad when they were just competing for us with oil, which is kind of the underlying, that's kind of the underlying input to every other product is energy. That was going to be bad. But if they have no use for the dollars in buying oil and they're just directly buying our stuff, that's going to cause inflation to go even worse. So we're not only set up for rapid, possibly hyperinflation with the loss of the petrodollar, but it's going to be even worse based off some of the activity that the Fed and the Treasury have been engaging in just within the past few weeks. It's very exciting. Up on the screen here, we have a graph for the combined GDP of the G7 versus BRICS, G7 countries. That's like us and England and Japan and I think France and Canada. I know Canada's in there. Screw Canada. And I'm sure that there's some other countries in there that add up to 7 countries. And then BRICS, you've got Brazil, Russia, India, China, and S country. They're a little bit easier to remember because they got the letters there. The G7's not as easy to remember. I still don't remember who's the S. You know who the
Canada.
S?
What do you mean? So Canada
BRICS.
1, that's 2. Germany 3. Italy,
I'm not. Oh, I wasn't reading it
Japan
up here.
5. UK 6, and
You're cheating. You're reading the key up here, aren't you?
Yeah. So that's the G7.
Okay. Oh, is SA? Oh, okay. So the S is Saudi Arabia for the BRICS ones. Okay. Yeah.
Yes.
So the combined economic output, the GDP of the BRICS countries, has surpassed us and our allies, which is not good. Because you now have them putting out more goods, and then now they're also going to be starting to price energy in their currencies. You're seeing essentially a flippening. You are witnessing the final days of the Western Empire, and it's not that like you're living in the final days. I think you're witnessing the final days, and I think you're going to have to live a lot of time after the final days, after it's over. You have basically, you've basically just witnessed Joe Biden over the course of about 18 months completely destroyed America's future. It's really, really hard to like explain that like without going into like, a 10-hour long documentary about all the aspects of it. But
what's led to this is it didn't start to when Biden, so the Chinese have been.
He certainly pushed a lot of stuff over the edge.
He allowed it to happen. I'm not actually disagreeing with you. I'm just saying that China and Russia have been pushing for this future, and he allowed it, right, to happen. But they've been working towards this, and you saw it was leveling out, right, in 2015.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like something happened in right after 2015. Something happened to like put a screeching halt to this flippening of the GDPs, and then I don't know, something after that, something around 2020, like it lost, maybe mid 2019. Yeah, something slipped, and it kept going.
The policies of many countries and many leaders were in working together towards this future, but Trump most likely is that wild card that caused a massive pause in that future, and Biden accelerated it. So it's a very big thing. And it's also it's not something you can undo easily. The damage that's been done is not something that one president taking over can immediately reverse, because this is there's a lot of inertia behind these actions, right? It's hard, you can't just randomly get or quickly get a country to reverse what currency they're doing their purchases in.
Well, and it's almost an irreversible operation without some kind of war, because you have the BRICS countries, which are, they're a little more belligerent. They're recent, they're what I would consider to be young countries. They were recently third world countries, and they've, not because of any benefit to their ideology, but just merely because of the capitalism that we spread around the world. They have They have joined us in the future, but they're young countries, and they're still powered by bad ideologies. They're still authoritarian regimes, and the Western nations, we're led by a bunch of pussies and cucks, and so we very calmly stepped back and allowed the BRICS. That's what our leaders did. They very calmly allowed the BRICS countries to take power and to overtake us. If we suddenly get Trump back in office, or DeSantis, or whoever, maybe the QAnon shaman, maybe he becomes president, and we start pushing back again, the BRICS countries' leaders are not going to just do what we did and sit back and allow it to flip back. No, they're going to fight.
You also know why China is doing this, particularly both China and Russia, but China mostly. China is at a point where their population has a gigantic bubble of age, right? So their working population, because of their one-child policy, is going to age out of the economy and become a huge population of people who need people to take care of them. So a large portion of the people that are younger than them, their kids and their kids' kids, their jobs are going to be elder care, which means that they're not going to be producing GDP. So a large part of their population are either, not to disparage, but they're users of the economy and people caring for them. So they need something that will allow them to be a consumer economy like we are, and them getting the petrodollar is one of the best avenues of doing that. Also, getting the wealth that is in Taiwan would be a way to help to keep their economy from collapsing. They need to do something. They're facing a huge economic collapse within the next generation if they don't do something now.
And we're facing an economic collapse in our generation. It's very exciting.
And their plan for the last 20, 30 years has been the replacement of America so they can do what we've been doing. We've been having a consumer economy propped up by the petrodollar, and they want to steal that from us, steal our influence. They've been going around to other countries with their Belt and Roads Initiative to try to gain influence and market share in other countries so they can supplant us as the market, the consumer economy in the future. And to be able to take the military action they're going to take now, they need to do it while their population is still young enough so they have people that can actually fight that war.
Yep. Alrighty. So, another thing to just kind of to understand how the dominoes have been set up here. One of the first things Joe Biden did when he got into office, again, just as fast as he possibly can, making America less secure, and have less of the stuff that we've said. You're just ruining as much as he can. This graph is the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's the something happened in maybe late 2020. Something happened, and it was dropping about as fast as it possibly could. The final number right now, this is as of the end of November last year, so it's about 4 months out of date. Right now, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve sits at 371 million barrels. It was at almost 700 million barrels when Trump was in office. About 650 when he left office. And part of that was oil prices were high, and so Trump sold off a little bit of the oil, and they had a plan that they were going to buy some back, and they did. And it was a good deal for the American people, and it made sense. And then Biden just came in and decided that, oh, actually, that 650 million barrels, that's actually for the Democrat Party because we won the presidential election. So we're going to just sell it to China. And a lot of that oil ended up in China. Everybody forgets that. And so 371 million barrels, America uses about 20 million barrels a day. So that gets us about 18 days. If something were to happen, that gets us about 18 days of oil reserve. And you can't actually get 20 million barrels a day out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's only capable of moving about 5 million barrels per day. So, that's not very good. And a reason why that's not very good is because there was some other breaking news this morning, condensed for us by Wall Street Silver here. As you can see, there's a Reuters article down here. So you have a bunch of oil-producing countries have decided that they are not going to be producing as much oil. Russia has stated that they will be cutting oil production by 500,000 barrels per day. Saudi Arabia is going to be reducing their production by 500,000 barrels per day. Iraq is reducing production by 211,000 barrels per day. The UAE is reducing production by 144,000 barrels per day. Kuwait reducing by 128,000 barrels per day. Kazakhstan reducing by 78,000 barrels per day. Algeria, they're reducing by 48,000 barrels per day, and Oman is reducing by 40,000 barrels per day. Collectively, that's 1.64 million barrels per day.
Is that more than we were able to put out when we were selling the reserve?
Yeah, so when Biden was trying to flood the midterms with oil, he was pumping it at 1 million barrels per day out of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. And now the OPEC nations have ripped that in half back out of the economy.
Undoing any benefit that he had made, any small benefit that he had achieved by crippling our reserve is being undone.
Yes. Now, why is this happening? Well, probably to induce some shortages. Probably because a lot of these nations, you might notice a lot of these nations are part of the BRICS agreement. A lot of them are not super friendly with the U.S. They're more friendly with Russia and China. And I would guess that what is going to go on here is that there will be a shortage of oil, but there's not going to be a shortage of oil for China or for Russia or for other members of the BRICS alliance. That's going to drive up prices here at home. And all of a sudden, then there's going to be less Americans buying oil because we just won't be able to buy it. It won't be there. And then they're going to start transacting amongst themselves in yuan and ruples and whatever goofy seashells they use in Kuwait. And then other countries that need oil, like India. Well, they're going to say, well, it's kind of hard to get dollars these days. Or, we don't really have much use for them. And you guys seem to want yuan. And China's got a lot of nice stuff that is priced in yuan. We'll start buying stuff in yuan. And then all of a sudden, there will not only be no oil, but there'll also be no oil traded in dollars. And so, I don't know, stuff's going to get bad. It's going to get real bad. Going to get bad. What do you think, Dyer?
I think it's good bad.
Yeah.
I'm trying to look up what, how do you spell Kuwait?
K-U-W, wait. K-U, wait. K-U, wait? I can wait.
Kuwait.
What you looking up Kuwait for?
Currency. So it's a dinar.
Like I said, seashells.
This is it's very bad, and like I said, I'm very concerned that this gives the U.S. a huge incentive to go to war to prevent it from happening. It gives China a massive incentive to go to war to make sure it happens.
I don't know how we get back on top of this without a war. I think that we have broken stuff so badly I think that Biden has broken stuff so badly. I think that to get back to where we were, we would have to do what we did in World War II, which is like a total destruction, decimation of the entire planet, except for the continental United States. And then we just kind of re-implanted U.S. everywhere else, and we set up how the entire world economy works. There was no world economy after World War II. The U.S. was the only country with the ability to manufacture and the only country with a working currency. And we essentially created, after World War II, we created the entire global economy. Every country joins at our leisure, and they are excluded at our leisure. Up until this year, up until maybe even just this week, maybe even today for some of these things. This is happening really, really quickly. And when we hit the tipping point, it's going to happen even more quickly.
Right now, America, when they go to the bargaining table, they are usually bargaining from a position of extreme strength, because we have two things. We have a massive economy that we can use to either prop up or destroy any country or regime. And we also have a very powerful military, at least on paper, that is able to secure things and pressure countries into doing things. Even if by the fact that we have the military-industrial complex that allows us to sell them security, or at least the illusion of security, that military and that economy and the mixture of the two is what allows America to get what we want. And people don't think people realize what it'll be like to live in a world where we don't go to the bargaining table and people are pressured to do what we want them to do.
So, is it bad that the New York DA is, unjustly targeting Trump and abusing his power? Yep.
Of course.
Could Trump be responding to that with, they're doing this to me, not some like goofy platitude about, well, they want to go after you, but I'm just in the way, and it's DeSantis, he's a pussy, and he sucks. Is that the way that Trump could be responding to this? Or maybe Trump could be responding to this with, guys, they are doing this to me to distract you from what Biden did in all of these places. Trump should be every day going through, why is Russia cutting production? Why, they weren't doing that under me. Why are these countries trading not in dollars? I would never have allowed that. Why is this going on? Why did we just basically destroy our entire standing in the Middle East? Since Trump when Trump left office, we had total dominion over the Middle East. We had Afghanistan was where we wanted it. We had Iraq and Iran basically where we, as good as they could possibly fit where we wanted them. They were there. Syria was, it's Syria. And we had the UAE. We had a good relationship with them. I hate them. We've probably, I wouldn't mind nuking Dubai. If that happened, I wouldn't be shedding a tear. They suck. They're asshats. They funded and trained the 9/11 terrorists. They're bad people. But we had a working relationship with them, and it is of no benefit to us to not have a working relationship with them. We had the Middle East, the most complicated area in the entire world in the history of humanity, and we had it. Trump had it figured out. We had the crazy Asian countries. We had North Korea was all calm. We had China was calm. We had Russia was calm. Everybody was calm. Everybody was scared to fucking death of Trump. And we had the NATO alliance. We were getting that up to what it should be instead of a joke. We were proving to the UN that they were in fact the joke that we thought they were. Everything was going pretty well. We were on track to have stuff going really well. And it is really, maybe some of the stuff, you're not wrong, Dyer, that a lot of the stuff wasn't just, is Biden pushing it over the edge, but a lot of these things have had the stage set for them for decades. Maybe if Trump got office in 2020, maybe some of this stuff would have happened anyways. But there's a lot of things that Biden is doing and not doing that seem to have specifically caused these things to happen earlier than maybe they otherwise would have needed to happen. Some of this stuff is
right.
not some of this stuff is not
Trump was the
reversible.
brakes on Trump was the brakes on a globalist plan. Biden is a full 100% invested in that plan and doing everything he can to make sure it happens.
So next week when Trump gets arrested and everybody wants to talk about that, and there's not much you can do when you've got the commentators talking to you about it, but keep an eye out for what's going on in the foreign policy. If you're talking to your friends about it and they want to talk about Trump and just say the same things over and over and over again about, he's getting arrested and that's bad. And you're like, well, that is bad. Some of this other stuff's pretty bad too. Maybe we should take a look at that. I heard you about what Trump said, and what's happening with him. And we all obviously agree that it's unfair, but do we need to repeat the same thing over and over and over again? Or maybe should we look at some of this other stuff that's going on? Would it maybe be beneficial for Trump to be talking about some of this other stuff that's going on rather than just focusing on himself? Yeah, probably. That's all I got. I got to pee really bad. So that's probably the end of the show.
I'll see you guys next week.
All right.
Out.
Travis signing